Hey guys, welcome to part 8 of What If Naruto Became Serious During Chunin Exam. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Rippling 26. Inheritors Part 3. A green sea of bamboo trees surrounded Sasuke. All around him, countless bamboo trees were planted on the ground with his feet littered with drying leaves. Sasuke looked around and saw three figures huddled and talking to one another. All of them were wearing white robes, and emblems of 6 magatama surrounding the neck area covering were emblazoned on them. The three men haven't noticed them as the one whose back was turned against him suddenly let loose his killing intent. It was so potent that Sasuke shivered in complete fear. He had never felt so scared as he was when Zabuza confronted them. This time though, he had no one else around him. And in just a second, the one whose back was turned against simply waved his hand and beheaded the two people in front of him. Blood splattered across stone and the bamboo trees. A trepid silence then happens for a few seconds, and then a gentle but ominous wind swayed the top of the bamboo trees. From the silence between Sasuke and this person, a few seconds more, and Sasuke finally heard the man. He was chuckling and it turned to full-blown laughter. The man held his face with his right hand. An off-putting smile escaped his lips as maniacal laughter echoed throughout the bamboo forest. The man's huge grin was etched on the man's face as he shouted, "So this is power. This is the sole thing that I lack, that I can't become the heir of your ideas, father. Is this what you were trying to hide from me? Why you chose my foolish brother?" His screams became louder and louder as became more unhinged. He turned and reached out to Sasuke with his free hand, still giggling to himself, eyes of blood red morphing into a strange kaleidoscopic pattern. This nightmare. This horrible endless nightmare. Father, do you see what you've done? What you created? If by killing Asura, I will be letting Ninshu to its true purpose. This is the path of Ninshu must take. Peace. Through power. Sasuke's surroundings soon changed. It changed to a landscape of red and black. Sasuke's feet were not touching solid ground anymore, but a rippling water, wooden coffins and wooden grave spots floated around him. Sasuke noticed that these coffins showed the faces of those inside them. He saw the faces of his clansmen, pale and rotting on faces. His father's eye sockets were empty as if it was desecrated, and his mother's beautiful face was blemished with a blade sticking out of the forehead. Sasuke felt sick to his stomach as well as an indescribable rage threatening to spill out. He turned around once more and the coffins were soon replaced with floating corpses, some more mutilated than the rest. Sasuke's heart started beating faster. He saw the form of Kakashi, multiple gashes on his torso and piercing hole in his head, blood still seeping from them. Naruto was beside Kakashi, right arm torn from his body, holes on his chest and abdomen and multiple cuts lining his formerly tanned skin. His expression showed that Naruto was killed in an excruciating manner. Sasuke turned his eyes away for a moment and a voice called out to him. Sasuke-kun. Sasuke turned around and saw Sakura, kneeling before him, but behind him was Itachi, a sword in his hand with those deadened eyes of his Sharingan. Further behind was the man whose sanity slipped earlier, grinning maliciously as his hand outstretched to Itachi, and both of them mumbled the same phrase, peace through power. And just like his parents, Itachi had swung his sword at Sakura, but this time, intent on beheading her. Sasuke had woke up suddenly. Cold sweat escaped his face as he stared at the bottom of his bed. He was breathing heavily. His heart was still beating fast. It was that nightmare again. Sasuke turned to his right and looked at the clock in his desk. It was 3 in the morning. Too early to do anything conducive. Sasuke growled. These persistent nightmares always appeared every night he wanted to sleep. The amount of sleep he had lost for more than a week was enough to drive him up the wall. Thankfully, they became less and less frequent, but they were becoming more and more lucid. He didn't know why he was having these dreams. All that he does know was how his sanity was slipping night by night until Sakura had gotten word of his problem. She had prescribed to him first, a mixture of cocktail drugs that induced a dreamless sleep. It was effective, and she often came to him and induced an anesthetic jutsu to lull him to sleep. Deciding that staying in his room wasn't going to help, Sasuke went out of his room and into his living room, where he saw books and scrolls laid out across the room. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this, until he remembered that Sakura had been staying at his place because of this problem. She had advised that these nightmares will slowly disappear from his mind, but a person being with him would have helped him through this. He had reported to Falcon earlier about the mission and what happened. The Anbu instructor and commander had given him reprieve to adjust his mental bearings. It has been 3 days since they arrived and 3 days since Sakura moved in with him to watch over him, and it had certainly helped his well-being as of late. Sasuke then saw Sakura, asleep on the living room table with a book open beside her. Her head leaning on the table surface. He noted that she was still in her home clothes and not much else. It was a little cold inside the living room and went back to his room and grabbed his blanket. He then draped it over Sakura and used one of the couch pillows to make it as comfortable for her as possible. Sasuke stopped for a moment as he went into the kitchen. Since when did he become considerate of others? He turned and looked back at Sakura sleeping in the living room and then turned back into the kitchen. He supposed he was going to have to drink some tea to calm his nerves down. Heating a kettle filled with water, Sasuke was careful not to disturb his guest as he prepared his tea. He sat down beside the kitchen table and began pouring tea on his own. Sasuke then noticed a shadow creep out of his periphery. Although at home, Sasuke was prepared. With a flick of his right hand, he had launched a kunai from his sleeve and sent it flying towards the direction he felt his stalker was hiding from. The kunai hit the wall and Sasuke had his Sharingan active. Come out now before I decide to ram you with something else on your head. An empty smile was what greeted him. It was Sai. What are you doing here? Sai answered with a smile. I was simply asked to keep an eye on you. You know my affiliation, do you not? Sasuke nodded. What does Danzo want that he has to send a mole and watch over me? Sai then answered for him, that smile not escaping his face. You are a dangerous element for Danzo-sama. He thinks that you are at breaking point and that you can snap at any moment. He does not trust you completely. That is why I am here. And what are your objectives other than monitoring me? Sasuke asked, aware of Anbu protocols to be multi-objective based. Sai was no different considering Anbu doctrine in the village was almost universal in nature. You are not cleared for that kind of intelligence, Sasuke-san. Sasuke clicked his tongue. You can tell your superior that spying on your comrades in Anbu is a waste of manpower. I don't have to tell you about my measurement of loyalty, correct? I'm in Anbu the same as you. Sai then countered. Ah, that would be the case, Sasuke-san. If your brother didn't set a precedent. Sasuke growled at that. I can assure you that what happened to Itachi will not happen to me. But you need to hold your tongue if you can't even speak cordially without resorting to insults and topics that upset a person. That is not what he sees. Sai replied. And you, what do you see me as? Sasuke asked this testily. Sai merely tilted his head. I have no idea what you wish to say. Sasuke merely turned away from Naruto's replacement. Talking to Sai was upsetting to both him and Sakura. I have no business with a person who can't think for himself. If I were to attack you right now, I would just dismember you. Someone who is only a void isn't worth the effort to kill. You'll be dead before coming out of this house if you try. Now go away and tell your boss that he's no threat. Sai stopped for a moment. He had heard those words the same as before, and the Uchiha's stare reminded him of something. It was the same gaze that his former prisoner gave him, the eyes of pity. He didn't understand. Why would they look at him as if he was worthless? What kind of person would look at him with pity? I remember someone saying that to me as well. That you're worthless and that killing you gives no meaning. Sai nodded with a smile. Yes, exactly like you said. And for the longest time, I wondered why he would say that. He continuously beat me with not even a single jutsu, even if it meant that he dies if he doesn't. Yet he said to me that I was nothing and can't think of anything beyond what Danzo-sama has said to me. A blind sheep is easy prey. They often stray without the shepherd and his dog, and the sheep is eaten by wolves without fanfare. All it takes is for that sheep to die is to be separate from its flock. So you're looking down on me? Sai asked, and Sasuke answered without mincing his words, I am. You're not worth killing. You're not worth saving. You're not worth protecting. You're not worth anything. That is why you're expendable. That is why Danzo relies on your skill. Because you are nothing. A speck in his eyes, the same as I think about you. Now get lost. Sai wordlessly left the room. Both Sasuke and his former ward all judged him in the same manner. Were Sakura and Sasuke right about him? No. He can't question Danzo. His mind has to focus. His mission is his priority. Sasuke looked at the clock once more. It was close to 4 a.m. He got up to prepare breakfast. As he laid the table with utensils, he found it peculiar now that he was preparing meals along with his guest. It was the first time someone had been in his home other than him after the tragedy. He looked back at the living room, looking at Sakura sleeping on her desk. He would never show this to anybody, but Sasuke smiled a little before he began preparing breakfast for the two of them. At Konoha's northern gate, at the break of dawn, 9 people arrived with 8 carrying the emblem of Konoha. Shikamaru was holding a scroll with him when Asuma spoke. That mission was pretty good for the team. I didn't think we'd have obtained vital information like this. But I'm glad that we did. Asuma stretched as Guy nodded. Indeed. This is a breakthrough for us. Especially now that we have another member in our ranks. Suigetsu seemed peeved at this, though. I traded one prison to another. What's the point if I have a bigger cage than the last one? The 3 Anbu vanished as they went past the gate, no doubt about to report to their superiors before going for the Hokage. Asuma answered, it's because you're now a vital part of Konoha's forces. You haven't been affiliated with Kiri, right? Other than my clan, no. I was sent away by my brother from Kiri to escape the purges. Orochimaru happened to be in town when the massacre started. He managed to capture me and send me to that tank you just saw. Choji asked, but weren't the purges almost a decade ago? So you've been stuck there for a while. Suigetsu nodded with a scowl, sure was. About 8 years to be exact. I was only fed inside that tube with jugs of electrolytes and essential stuff. So getting out meant I get to eat some normal food once again. But you guys just indentured me to this place. Not cool. Ino then answered, you were a prisoner to one of Konoha's greatest enemies, Suigetsu-san. There was no one trustworthy to vouch for you there. Meaning you were either left behind because Orochimaru got bored with you, or you were left behind as a plant. An inside man just for the day Orochimaru comes back to Konoha. All those possible scenarios are real. It is why we're taking you to my father's work to see if all that you said were in fact real. And me being chained to your friend's shadow? Suigetsu asked. Shikamaru answered. So you can't try any funny stuff. Now if you'll excuse me, we best be heading our way. Suigetsu noted the short sword that Shikamaru was holstering to his lower back and held sideways much like his female teammate, except the sword was longer and looked like only half of a really good daisho pair. So you guys also practice with the sword, huh? Suigetsu said as they went to the T&I office. Something moved besides Ino's periphery and saw a man standing on the rooftop before disappearing. Ino answered with a nod, it's a necessity for some. But I still have a long way to go. Ino then thought about the new heights Sakura had attained since their training. It brought out her competitive self towards Sakura, who has already found her place in society. I thought it was just the perfect skill to go with my abilities, so far. There aren't many sword users here that can match up to the skill of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Suigetsu simply shrugged, I don't expect a lot of people do. The mist integrated kenjutsu in our academies very early on aside from the basics that I know of today. By the time they arrived in Konoha's intelligence bureau, Guy had left and mentioned to check on his own team. You know, I never get tired of looking at this building and giving me the creeps. Shikamaru mentioned this while Choji nodded. Ino didn't seem fazed at all. That's because you had never talked to the people here, you two. Ibiki-san and Anko-san are fun to talk to, but you won't notice it with the way they act in front of a crowd. I'm sure your father has a lot to do with it, Ino. Shikamaru replied, and Ino somewhat smiled at that, maybe. But they're a cool bunch, just you wait. When they entered the building, they were met with a blonde-haired man whose hair reached all the way to his back and tied to a ponytail, and a stoic-looking man with scars planted on his face. His forehead protector fashioned as a bandana. Ah, Ino, Yugao-san alerted me with that you were coming here with your friends. She said you had to clear someone and vouch for his legitimacy. Inoichi said this as Ino nodded. Yes, Dad. We managed to free one of Orochimaru's alleged prisoners without the cursed seal. He's apparently a member of the Hazuka clan from Kiri, and we think he might be a good fit for our forces. Ino motioned for Suigetsu, who then walked up to Ino's father and to the scarred man. We usually set free POW when we get them, but I can see Yugao's reasoning to keep you here. The man said as he held his chin as he looked down on Suigetsu with his stoic and discerning eyes. Suigetsu looked at the scarred man and a chill ran up his spine. Ibiki, I think this conversation should be addressed somewhere, don't you think? Inoichi asked the man and Ibiki nodded. I'll have a room arranged. Just need to get rid of the cigarette butts and the poker set. I swear, Anko is such a slob when it comes to upkeep. We don't have the budget for personal janitors in this place. Inoichi laughed a little as Suigetsu looked a little troubled. Was he going to be interrogated? Maybe he should have made a run for it after their raid. No one would have noticed. The older blonde man looked at Suigetsu's almost concealed expression and assured the boy, don't worry, this is standard clearance for all shinobi. We will question you with your time on Orochimaru's hands and maybe we can glean more information than we use against that man. Suigetsu let out a sigh as Ibiki replied, now where's the fun in that? Oh, Ibiki-sensei, you and your mind games. Ino laughed, all the while Shikamaru and Choji stared at Ino with eyes bulging out of their heads. Ibiki-sensei. Both of them shouted. Ino asked like it was the easiest thing in the world, what? Ibiki chuckled a little, a sinister smile forming on his lips, what? Didn't think this bag of bones didn't have it in him to teach kids these days. You rookies wound me. Actually, the whole department has been helping my daughter, Shikamaru, Choji, we take turns in teaching our member on the intelligence network. Shikamaru and Choji were staring at Ino intently, especially Shikamaru, who was more intense than his best friend. So all that stuff you said about you being jealous of what was on my plate was, left eye twitching at the absurdity of it all. Ino replied with a grin and shouting a bit excitedly, a common ruse. You got to be kidding me. Both Shikamaru and Choji shouted once again at the same time. Well, I guess it was inevitable at this point. We had her train at the hospital at one point and listen to the neuroscience division there and glean on some stuff to get her up to speed in our place and have her learn just the basics of healing techniques. Inoichi mentioned and was a little sheepish. Ibiki smirked. That had been an interesting watch. Seeing Inoichi's daughter gather information as part of her initiation brought a certain air of pride that their work was valued even to the next generation. The fact that the Nara boy was none the wiser was quite a satisfying way of knowing Ino's diligence and capability to become part of their department. Just because you're familiar with someone, kid, doesn't make it seem that she'll stay the same. And it was that familiarity that she used to have you all fooled. Ibiki replied, he didn't like to gloat, but this one made it seem like he was damn proud of their newest member. Asuma laughed out loud at this as he said to his students, sorry, boys, I knew what she was getting into and didn't want to have to break a promise to Ibiki with this, seemed like an amusing way to go about in fooling you two. Shikamaru looked at their sensei as if he grew a second head. I'm not surprised that you knew, but did we have to be guinea pigs for that? Ibiki's smirk was widening at this, of course, you know the old saying about where you keep your friends and enemies. Shikamaru sighed at this, well, at least she can cut with the stress crap she's been complaining every time we meet. Seriously, I never even noticed. You weren't supposed to, kid. If you did, Ino wouldn't have been a good agent. Ibiki then turned to Inoichi as he said, enough of messing with them. I've received word from Hokage-sama about a certain someone's agent being placed in your daughter's circle. Inoichi scowled at this, so you have. Is he monitoring one of Ino's friends? My conjecture is that he's monitoring not just one person. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at this. If it is what I think it is, then I've got enough suspicion on who they might be looking to keep on a short leash. Ibiki sighed and said, no more out of your mouth, Shikamaru. It's why I had Ino conceal whatever it is what she was really set out to do. She's there to provide counterintelligence against our potential little spy. Or at least, that's her new objective this time. Asuma then continued, you should let them do their work, Shikamaru. What you are expected to learn isn't the intelligence division's workings. You are expected to work with what they provide. Sometimes you should let your comrades do the work so that you can take it easier. If I wanted to take it easy, I wouldn't have went with Dad's plan to work at the administration building in his division. And we don't need anyone to meddle with that work. Your work is yours, ours is ours. Shikamaru, I understand why you were willing to take part of your father's work, just as much as I want to with mine. We're expected to work not just together, but also as a well-oiled machine. Konoha's military runs on the interdependency of all the divisions here in the village. We're not just soldiers, Shikamaru. We're all under the employ of the village. It needs to be run smoothly in order to maintain our status in the world. A house divided cannot stand. Surviving is our most important goal. Just as we are now recovering from the tragedies that had set our village back, it's our goal to be able to survive the coming times ahead. It was Ino who answered this time. Her smile was replaced with a frown. Ino understood her place now. She held no hesitation to her beliefs. Her survival counts on the village running at maximum productivity, especially from its shinobi. Shikamaru seemed to have accepted this. His best friend Choji understood what Ino was willing to do. We understand. Choji answered and Shikamaru nodded. Let's go, Choji, at least let us help you if you need anything. Ino smiled at her two teammates and friends. I'll keep that in mind, Shikamaru, I'll let you know when. Eastern Sea, a town island 20 kilometers away from Uzushio. Naruto and Jiraiya had arrived at this island, leaving the small cargo ship behind as they dropped off their earned supplies from Natashiko village. Naruto looked around and noticed that the port town was lively compared to the previous towns that he had been in. He then looked at his sensei and Jiraiya answered, this is Wadatsumi Port. It used to be an outpost for shinobi from Uzushio. Many of the refugees of the country after the Second War came from this port. It was a site of a massacre that would pale in comparison to that of the main island. Konoha had fought tooth and nail to reclaim this port back then. But seeing as Uzushio was destroyed, they had let merchants take over this town and hired shinobi from our country to serve as protection from time to time against pirates. This is the nearest island that all ships can come close as far as Hai no Kuni is concerned. We can't dock on the island itself? Naruto asked and Jiraiya shook his head. We can't. The island is surrounded by a natural defense filled with whirlpools. That in Uzushio was armed to the teeth with defense seals that activated these whirlpools in the first place. It makes you think of the manpower required to have destroyed an emerging world power like Uzushio. So how are we going to cross it? We walk to Uzu? Naruto asked. Jiraiya grinned. That's where the fun begins. Jiraiya mentioned as he holds a paper with a seal in his hands. This is a one-off seal that directly sends me to the island on its shores. Your mother provided me this seal as a keepsake to this day as an entry pass for me to Uzu. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this and asked, where's mine then? Jiraiya then said, loving as your mother is, kid, she wasn't exactly about to let you off easy. She had left a letter for me a few days before she died that if ever there was a chance that she wouldn't make it, she had given this seal to me to serve as your trial to enter the village. She had planned on doing this on her own. But in a weird sense, she sensed her impending death one day and handed over this task to me if ever her premonition came to pass. She's a thoughtful parent, kid. Same as your father. Naruto looked out on the other side of the island. From a far-off distance, he could see a tall mountain behind the sea. Its silhouette was imprinted on his mind. It must be Uzushio. He looked back to his godfather who was grinning as he disappeared in cloud of smoke as the seal activated. Naruto had his eyebrows raised in surprise as he turned back to that far and away island that he could see with his eyes. The trial had begun. Naruto walked to the other side of the island and sat down on the beach there as he stared onto the island of her mother's birthplace. He thought of walking there, but he didn't know if he could make such a perilous journey. He had never thought to use his water walking exercise to cross over the seas. He hadn't had enough experience to maintain his footing for a very long time on the water's surface, and the turbulent tides of the whirlpools would undoubtedly hamper his control even further. He then had an idea of using his experiment and unsealed the wooden board from one of his scrolls. It was still an experiment. The past few days yielded him no results when he tried to revise the sealing matrix to steadily increasing and more complicated patterns to his seals. He didn't exactly know what the effect was, and he was letting his clones do the experiment work. He's made progress, but he didn't know just how far it could take him. Oh well, I guess when you have to bite the kunai, you're going to have to bite hard. Naruto unsealed his work, the wooden board now adorned with multiple seals, as he solemnly looked at his mother's former home. He took a deep breath and reviewed the seals he applied, rewriting old seals as he did so, his arm moving automatically as he erased old seal matrices and cores and writing them with new ones. The process was long and tedious, but Naruto did not even stop for a moment. Once he was finished, Naruto stood up and put away his ink and brush, as well as grabbing a pair of goggles from his bag. Jiraiya had brought him a pair early on when he thought that he couldn't stop Naruto from pursuing this experiment. He wore the pair to cover his eyes and got on his board. In response, the seals glowed. Naruto's feet were now glued to the board itself, looking him there as if he was performing his tree climbing exercise. Naruto felt his heart racing as he remained there. He crouched a little as if he was bracing for impact, and the blonde finally pumped more chakra to the seal. Naruto could hear and feel the rumbling and vibrations to his feet and the wind whistling and growling quick. It was then that he felt a powerful and angry howling of the winds beneath his feet. Whoosh! Naruto took off from the beach like a rocket. The rush of the wind was quick and instantaneous as Naruto accelerated further and further until he began to tilt upwards, taking off from the sea that he glided on and into the air and a streak of wind leaving behind him visible to the naked eye. Naruto was ecstatic. His grin was from ear to ear as he flew upwards. The view of the sea below him getting wider and wider as he reached towards the clouds. He had surpassed the dense clouds above and Naruto stopped for a moment to feel the air for himself, his jutsu slowing down as he did so. He took in a deep breath as he spiraled down below, spinning and performing a downward roll with the board, the winds following his every movement. Naruto kept his eye to where he was supposed to go, the spinning that he performed earlier not distracting him from his direction. He was already halfway in just a few minutes. He grabbed the board beneath his feet with his right hand to get his bearings and to reposition himself and righted his course. He bore down further, increasing his speed, and he could faintly hear whistling as he sped up in the air. Below, he could see the whirlpools swirling, and there were so many of them. It was more than he anticipated, but they could not harm him no matter what they could do. He was getting nearer and nearer to his target destination, and Naruto eased on, skimming to the water surface as he passed through the eddies behind him. Then, Naruto noticed something. He was not stopping fast enough. Over at the coast, he could see Jiraiya casually waiting for him under the shade of a palm tree. The man stood up as he saw his apprentice cheat his way to the trial and noticed that the boy was not stopping. Jiraiya's eyes widened as Naruto was now screaming as the board hit the surface of the calmer side of the sea and the blonde splashing water all around as he was heading to the coast. By the time he made it to the shallower parts, Naruto stumbled on the waters, rolling onto the sea in a wipeout as he skidded on the beach face first. Through his muffled voice covered by the sand, Naruto raised his hand and said, "I'm working on it." Jiraiya had to clap at his student's ingenuity. Kushina probably never expected her son to cheese the test so perfectly. Well, almost perfectly. The ruins of Uzushiogakure. Rubble. Everything there was only rubble. There was no mystical library of legends of the fabled Uzumaki clan. Nothing was in there. Only rubble, dust, and a destroyed building of what could have been the said library of legends. Yakushi Kabuto looked up. The only remaining things that would have told him of this once magnificent establishment were stone columns and collapsed wooden floorboards. The man looked beside him. One was a redhead whose hair reached to her upper back and wore a pair of glasses and a plain long-sleeve shirt and a pair of short shorts with her legs covered up by thigh-high leather leg bracers and sandals. This was Uzumaki Karen, a child that Orochimaru had abducted from grass country after killing the girl's mother. She was supplanted by the man himself to act as another one of his agents during the Chunin exam and was a candidate to be given the cursed seal, but circumstances had delayed that plan earlier and that Orochimaru had not yet tested mixing her blood with the enzymes of his next companion. A large hulking boy for his age, orange hair wildly at the back and combed combined with a large cloak and only a pair of black pants. This was Tenbin no Jugo, a man who willingly gave himself up to Orochimaru in the hopes to cure the man of his rage urges. He was placed initially under the care of Kimimaro, but upon the boy's death, Jugo was imprisoned and his urges were kept in check by his solitude. Only through Orochimaru and Kabuto's special serum that he injects Jugo with now were able to contain his urges. The past several months had resorted him and his master to mass-produce the cursed seal to artificially increase their assets for war. While many had still gone insane, some remained quite lucid enough. Orochimaru was livid that his best guards were bested by Konoha's genin. Genin. Not even Chunin or above. They were killed by mere genin. Kabuto was disappointed at this. He had never thought that Orochimaru's elite were that weak to be defeated by ninja who were only recognized as such mere months before they were elected to participate in the Chunin exams. Clearly, there was something in Konoha that neither he nor Orochimaru anticipated. Begin looking. Kabuto demanded, and the two began scrounging throughout the destroyed library. The reason why Karen was here was to serve as not only their censor, but also to be the one who would be the key to unlocking whatever secret was here. Orochimaru had sent him out here on this mission to look for a cure for his affliction. The Shiki Fujin was a persistent problem that limited Orochimaru's use of jutsu. Only jutsu that can be used without seals were his only options, and that irked the Snake Man despite his already formidable repertoire of techniques. The said sealing method, based on further research that Orochimaru concluded, was that it was a lost sealing art of the Uzumaki clan. The said art was a terrifying technique that called forth the essence of the death god that sealed away both user and target. It was more akin to a curse or a kinjutsu rather than a mere fuinjutsu. Orochimaru reasoned that all jutsu comes with weaknesses, and it included the Shiki Fujin. There were no absolutes, merely revisions. That was why they were here in Uzushiogakure. And the trip was a total pain in the neck to make. So whatever was in Uzushio, it had better be worth it. A sudden startle had brought Kabuto out of his thoughts when he heard Karen yelp a little. Kabuto went to her as Karen's senses were invaded by this new sensation. Someone's here in the island. This person has already made to the beach without even my sensor abilities noticing. Kabuto clicked his tongue at this, a Jikuukan-based ninjutsu. That was the only explanation on how someone could bypass Karen's long-range sensing. And another yelp from Karen escaped as he said this. The girl replied, someone came from the air and landed here, and he's fast, and that chakra is huge. Kabuto then soughed to his subordinates, we will retreat for now and do reconnaissance. A shinobi who can do Jikuukan ninjutsu cannot be taken lightly ever. Case in point, the Yondaime Hokage. But still, the question remained. Who would be interested in the ruins of a dead clan apart from them? Kabuto had to look at his options then there. They would have to lay low and discover just who this person was. The three were immediately dispersed. Kabuto had ordered Karen to point where these two dangerous people were. She pointed to the east and said the precise distance of about 3 kilometers from where they were. Kabuto then ordered the duo to stick close to him as they were in the canopy above to hide and look for their target. Before they got close, Kabuto then handed over Jugo a small vial of a serum. The giant of a man then took the whole thing down as if it was routine, and the effects were immediate as the man turned docile. The effects of this suppressing serum were only for a few hours, as Kabuto noted, but it was enough to not give away their direction and hopefully not engage with the two. Kabuto stopped when he finally got a glimpse of his targets. Of all the rotten luck. There on the forest floor and on the way to the village was Uzumaki Naruto, a low to intermediate threat to Oto and Jiraiya, a high-ranking threat that people would think twice to square off. Kabuto motioned for his subordinates to keep quiet and the duo nodded. They looked down and saw the sedate pace that the two were going off to, all the while talking to each other. I still can't believe that you managed to cheat your way out of Kushina's trial. But I guess I can overlook that. You got here of your own merit after all, even though the way you did it is unexpected. Well, you didn't even say what I had to do other than cross the damn ocean to get here, Ero Sennin. So no points on lecturing me on what's fair. Naruto replied. Ah, you have a point about that. Jiraiya laughed a little at that. Still though, what's the purpose of traveling all the way here to this place? There's nothing here. You said the village was ransacked and burned to the ground. Naruto mentioned as they were about to approach the ruins. Jiraiya's smile turned into a frown as they walked. Your mother never fully got over the fact that her village was destroyed. There was something inside her that wanted to pass on her knowledge and skills as a fuinjutsu specialist. She was proud to be an Uzumaki. She always did say that she loved her parents dearly, and the destruction of Uzu broke her heart too much. This place serves as her reminder of what she had lost. And finally, they had reached it. The destroyed walls of Uzushio, and inside were the ruins. Debris and rubble of rocks, decaying wood and tattered fabrics. Many of the dead here had decomposed so long ago that only bones were left. They were not even buried. There was no time. The sacking of the village was complete and the place was completely devoid of life. This silence that surrounded them was deafening to Naruto's ears. Naruto, this is the aftermath of hatred and fear. Where not even a single blade of grass can grow. Naruto looked down and felt the earth beneath him. The whole village was devoid of life. The earth was scorched. Nothing was left. Naruto felt empty. A reminder of what mom lost. Naruto murmured those words as he then turned to Jiraiya. Was there anything here that was noteworthy for the Uzumaki? Jiraiya gave a nod. If there was ever a clan that kept its records on its seals, they were the Uzumaki. Their method of fuinjutsu reflects their character, and so variations existed, and the clan decided to archive those discoveries into their scrolls and stored in their legendary library. Said to be the very quintessential part of the village. The five powers wanted this knowledge, but in their overzealous desire to conquer the land, they inadvertently destroyed the library and along with it, the records of their most famous discoveries. Naruto and Jiraiya stopped at the area where the library should have been. Naruto then looked around. He could only see rubble, stone debris and dust. Rotten wood collapsed inside and scrolls were unreadable and torn to bits, decayed by the elements. All this destruction just for the lust for power. Jiraiya watched his apprentice, who looked around. This library before him used to be so big and grand. He had remembered in his youth when Sarutobi Hiruzen served as an envoy. He had brought his students along with him and each learned much from the library that they found. The wonderful place of discovery was here. And Hiruzen was smiling all along at his students as he went about his business with the clan head at that time. It was probably why the three of them knew a thing or two about fuinjutsu, but Jiraiya was the only one who took it more seriously than his teammates. They were about to head to the center of the city where the Uzumaki clan used to reside in when Jiraiya noticed something inside. Underneath the rubble, there was a silver protrusion that was seen at the tip of the rubble. The silvery color seemed untouched by the elements. Naruto then noticed it too and began dusting off the object. He was about to pull the object out when he felt that the object was heavy by nature. Naruto began digging his way below, and as he dug further, the object seemed to be getting bigger and bigger until it reached towards the floor. This wasn't just an object, it was a silver statue. Naruto looked up and noticed that the statue was at least 2 feet taller than him. Naruto dusted himself off as Jiraiya followed after him and looked at the statue. In detail, the statue was nothing more than an image of a mirror reflecting back the one that was in front of it. Naruto's image was soon distorted as it was replaced by a seal at face level as Naruto recognized the seal. A blood seal. Naruto asked, and Jiraiya came to the same conclusion as well. I guess it's like the seal with the Iwagami, then. Care to try, kid? Naruto nodded. He was curious as to where it led. Naruto cut his finger with his kunai and then smeared the blood on the mirror as he touched it. The seal inside glowed a brilliant red and the mirror began unraveling itself as it spirals out. Naruto and Jiraiya then saw a hallway inside. The floor was white with dark blue walls. The white floor seemed to glow as it went forward. Jiraiya looked at his apprentice with worry and asked, "Prepare yourself." Naruto gave a nod. I know. Once inside, the duo began their trek forward. From the outside world, 3 figures had arrived and saw what had happened. Kabuto figured out that this encounter can help with Orochimaru's affliction. This may be my chance if we can look into the Shiku Fujin. Kabuto and the others entered inside, intent on discovering whatever it is that can help their lord. Inside, Naruto and Jiraiya were making headway as they finally managed to exit the hall and into a small room. In that room were multiple scrolls and all nearly placed on a single bookshelf. But what caught their surprise was a fully intact skeleton out in front, a scroll in its hands wearing plated armor common in Jiraiya's time. Jiraiya grabbed the scroll and examined it before he yanked it from the skeleton that seemed to crumple to the floor as Jiraiya unfurled it and began reading its contents. What is it? Naruto asked and Jiraiya solemnly handed the scroll to his apprentice. Looks like this is all that's left of the legendary archives of the Uzumaki clan. This was all that they could salvage. My descendant. I am in the last days of my life. This scroll is all that I have left in my possession and behind me, the last legacy of our clan. It is not much and I am deeply remorseful that this is all that I could save. In this last moments of my life, my only solace is that our enemies have not found that which they seek. But I tell you, it exists. The weapon that will bring the 5 villages to its knees where not even their Jinchuriki is safe. We have longed for the day that this weapon be our only hope to survive, but no, this weapon is what brought us to our knees, power meant for destruction. Behind this shelf is the true legacy of the Uzumaki. Behind me is Minamoto no Banbutsu, gathering of all creation. As I am sure that you are Uzumaki, take it. Take it and use it or destroy it. Know that our legacy shall either live on or die with you. Let it be known that our sacrifice shall not be in vain. Naruto looked at the bookshelf and then at the scroll in his hands. The boy was quick to notice a seal written at the very end of the scroll. The seal was small enough that Jiraiya and he could notice. But he noticed that the man was silent when describing Minato no Banbutsu. Naruto wanted to ask but he kept quiet as well. Another secret not meant for everyone had just exposed itself directly to Naruto. The blonde took a deep breath, bit his finger once again and smeared blood to the small seal, and soon the stone wall behind the shelf started to shift. Jiraiya grabbed the scroll from his apprentice's hands as they walked inside. The small hallway changed color from white to red, and when the two had managed to walk to the other side, they saw a large dais in front of them with a flight of stairs leading to the top. Naruto gulped as he went up, wordlessly acknowledging the fact that he now had something that could forever change his life. Behind him, Jiraiya stood by at the door. As Naruto had reached for the very top, he saw at the very center of the dais was a short sword held on by rope and multiple paper seals hanging on each rope. The short sword was still in its sheath with the ropes interlocking each other at the very blade, indicating of its seal to indicate that no one was allowed to touch it. Naruto stood in trepidation as his hand slowly made its way towards the hilt of the blade. Once he had a grip of its handle, the seals written on the paper glowed softly in color and all dissolved at the same time. Naruto noticed that the rope began to loosen and dissolve as well. He was now left with only the wakizashi in his hands, the blade stored within its saya made of sturdy wood and leather colored a deep red. The tsuba was a mixture of black and red as the handle had red threads interlocking each other. As Naruto raised the short sword, 4 scrolls had immediately popped up below him, all had kanji written in them. Muin, Void Seal. Mu no Hauko, Spear of the Void. Takamagahara, Plane of High Heaven. Minato no Banbutsu. Arrow Sennin. Jiraiya turned to his apprentice as the blonde continued, "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Jiraiya answered, "Nothing good." At the other room, Kabuto began looking at each of the scrolls laden on the shelf and began to unfurl them one by one. The other 2 were also there as well, and each of his subordinates began to look for as well. "Found it!" Karen shouted as Kabuto was quick to look for Karen and found the scroll they were looking for with the title written as Shiki Fujin. Kabuto smiled as he wrapped the scroll up and stood up. "We got what we came for." Kabuto. "You bastard." A familiar voice stops him in his tracks as he saw Naruto behind him growling at the man who had just littered the scrolls on the floor. Kabuto remained cool under pressure as Jiraiya was scowling as well. "What are you doing here?" Naruto asked and noticed the scroll in his hands. Jiraiya had already suspected what it was. "You're looking for a way to reverse the effects that Sarutobi-sensei did to Orochimaru, aren't you?" Kabuto merely adjusted his glasses and answered, "Now why would I tell you that?" Kabuto was quick on the draw and held in his hand a syringe. The right hand of Orochimaru then threw the needle straight at Jugo, who shouted in pain as the liquid within its chamber was directly injected to Jirobo. It was true. They had developed a drug that can suppress Jugo's affinity with the abilities of the cursed seal. Jugo's affliction was very much involved with medical ninjutsu as it did with something else. But be that as it may, they also perfected a serum that can accelerate the enzyme's working properties and make Jugo susceptible to his rage. He could not handle Jiraiya in his current state, and Naruto being with the Toad Sage severely put him on a disadvantage even though he had Jugo. But he could not guarantee to match up with Jiraiya of all people. So he had to make a hasty decision, sacrifice his underlings for his escape. Aargh. K. Kabuto. What did you? You have served your purpose well, Jugo, goodbye. Kabuto then dashed out. Ninpo. Gamaguchi Shibari, Nia Art. Toad Mouth Bind. The walls of the said enclosure turned into a meat-like substance and raced its way to Kabuto, who was quick enough to escape. They were suddenly surprised when the giant of a man began transforming as his body convulsed from the quick, unstable and painful transformation taking place. Beside him Karen was shaking in fear. Kabuto had just left them to die. Jugo was shaking on the ground and his skin shifted to the brown hide that cursed seal users were known for. 10 spiky appendages appeared on his back as it looked like syringe needles, and his hands morphed with his left forearm turning into an axe and then the other turning into a claw. His face was changing into a monstrous and almost unrecognizable form, with his irises turning yellow and his sclera turning black. Jugo roared in his rampage, and his first victim on his sight was Karen. Karen could not move, her body being bound by the guts of the toad by Jiraiya. Jugo, however, was breaking loose from his binding. All the while, Jiraiya watched as a familiar feeling entered him. What this boy was experiencing felt like an unstable state of Arrow Sennin. Release the jutsu. I'm driving him outside, Naruto said as he performed the shadow clone jutsu and another clone popped beside him. Naruto prepared his Rasengan and doubled his chakra upit, larger and larger and larger. The orb that was the size of the palm of his hand usually was now about twice the size of his head. Way ahead of you, kid, Jiraiya said and quickly dispelled the jutsu as Naruto charged at Jugo. Utama Rasengan, big ball spiraling sphere. Naruto blasted Jugo away with the orb as it made contact, sending him spiraling outside and crashing throughout the ruined streets of Uzushiogakure. Wait, Naruto, we need to prepare a sealing jutsu. That boy has nature chakra flowing through him, but it's unstable and frankly dangerous. We need to prepare a seal immediately, if just to contain the boy's rage state. I'll be able to expel that nature chakra once we can subdue him. What will work? Naruto asked and Jiraiya answered, something like Fujihoin, evil sealing method. As if on cue, the sword in Naruto's hand complied. Inside Naruto's mind, the sealing method came to him in a flash. The blade inside the saya configured the necessary seals within and Naruto withdrew the sword. Naruto then walked outside, but not before kneeling beside Karen and asked, "You all right?" Karen gave a wordless nod. "Good, stay with my sensei, we'll keep you safe. Your name?" "Uzumaki Karen." Naruto grinned. "Looks like we're not all extinct after all." Naruto then ran outside as he stored the saya to his pouch, the wakizashi in his hand. When Naruto got outside, he was suddenly surprised when the claw had managed to grab him by the waist. Not enough time to perform a substitute. Naruto was suddenly thrown around and smashed to one of the old stone pillars and then smashed on the ground twice before being thrown to the center of the ruined village. Naruto got up, flinching as he bled through the forehead and mouth as well as multiple scratched and abrasions on his arms and legs. Good thing the vest kept most of his vital organs intact and absorbed some of the shock, but it hurt like a son of a bitch. Jugo dashed at him again. His speed surprised the blonde as wisps of chakra were coming out of the 10 needle-like appendages on his back. Jugo drew his arm blade at Naruto and the blonde immediately ducked by the telegraphed swipe. The blonde dashed forward in 2 steps and turned around as he blocked the arm blade with his wakizashi, but Naruto was thrown away by the man's monstrous strength. This bastard is stupidly strong. Is this what Sage Mode is going to be? Naruto asked to himself as he was planted back first into a stone wall and embedding himself there. Jugo's left arm then turned into a different shape. Now it looked like a giant claw with horns on the back. It actually looked like the same needle-like protrusions on his back. Naruto was not waiting to whatever else it could do. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique, Naruto shouted as 4 replicas took his place. With a quick substitution, Naruto managed to avoid most of the damage when Jugo planted that giant hand towards him. The blonde then shouted as he held up a hand sign, "Eat this, you son of a bitch." Bunshin Daibakua, Great Exploding Clone. Boom, 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 boom. Jugo was literally blown away as he was sent on the opposite side of the ruins. This allowed Naruto some breathing room. The blonde began formulating a plan in his head while Jugo was nowhere in sight. Naruto performed a Rasengan with his right hand and performed Tenrin with another, holding the sword between his teeth. If he was going to make it out Alve, he was going to outpace that damn freak. Ura Tenrin Kazuhana. Naruto mumbled as the winds howled to life around him, absorbing the rotating energy made by the Rasengan. Quickly, he made 3 more clones with him as the ones he conjured earlier all exploded. They all dashed in unison as they approached Jugo on different sides in quick and lightning-fast speeds. Jugo grinned manically and transformed once more as the 10 needle-like protrusions on his back changed larger with the caliber growing and growing. Jugo then unleashed an all-around attack made up of chakra, blasting anything around him. All 3 Narutos dodged perfectly with some being a narrow hit. The clones managed to stay corporeal enough as one managed to slip through the gaps of the beam attacks, and with his free hand, one of the clones activated Kuokan Zengeki and managed to cut 2 of the cannons. The rest followed. Another had managed to cut down 3 more to the right, leaving Jugo open on his right side. Jugo was about to adjust his beam attacks when another Naruto landed a Rasengan from above, pinning Jugo down, and then the real making a swipe to the man's right shoulder with his wakizashi. Fuinjutsu. Fujihoin, Sealing Arts. Evil Sealing Method. Jugo screamed and writhed in pain as Naruto's sealing took effect. The brown skin receded from his entire body. The hide vanished into nothingness as Jugo continued to scream until finally, he had returned to his human form, completely unconscious. It was then that Jiraiya had come out, now in sage mode as he saw his apprentice standing before the unconscious form of Jugo. "Ah, Naruto-chan, you got him?" Fukasaku asked. Naruto turned to his right and saw his sensei and his two elder toads sitting on his shoulders. "Yeah, hard to believe that we would find a member of the Tenbin clan to exist to this day." "Tenbin clan?" Naruto asked. "It's from where Jugo came from." A voice of a girl interrupted them. From the ruined library behind them stood Karen. The red-haired girl then approached the two at the front as she stood in front of Jugo. The Tenbin clan was made up of people who were sensitive to natural energy. However, due to their bodies being natural recipients, the amount of natural energy that enters them differ and imprecise most of the time, leading to an imbalance within their reserves and affecting their mental state as well. Shima said this as Jiraiya touched the boy's back and could feel the natural energy imbalance. They were wiped out soon after. Their clan was deemed far too dangerous to live. Their sturdy bodies made them incredibly hard to kill. Many shinobi fell on the night of their extermination. Naruto sighed at this. Is it just me? Or am I attracting a lot of these, last of their clan, types? I could swear my fucking luck can be the worst sometimes. Jiraiya then siphoned some of the natural energy out of the boy's body as he let go a part of his. That should stabilize this boy's chakra for a while. But we may have to perform another sealing just to suppress the boy's ability to absorb natural energy. Naruto then asked the old pervert, "You have one in mind?" Jiraiya nodded. "Yeah, Kudan Tetsuan, ninefold steel sealing method." "Funny you should say that, Arrow Senin." Jiraiya turned to his apprentice as he pointed to his newly acquired weapon. "This thing just taught me a sealing method that I didn't even know earlier. The Fuja Hoin, if I can remember, requires time and a bit of my blood to do. But this thing just made me do the seal immediately when the blade touched him." "No. So the rumors were true," Fukasaku mentioned, surprised that Naruto and Jiraiya managed to find out the Uzumaki's fabled weapon. Shima was less than composed about their current predicament. "Naruto-chan, that's a dangerous weapon to have in your hands. That's the fabled Minamoto no Banbutsu. We thought it was just rumors, but to know of its existence is danger in itself. This is bad. Naruto-chan, you should hide that sword immediately. That sword has the ability to create and unlock all seals," Fukasaku said to the boy. Naruto was surprised at that. "What? Minamoto no Banbutsu is as its name suggests. It's a collection of all sealing methods present in its creation, amalgamated and forged from a special ore found only here in Uzushio. It then collects all forms of new sealing methods and records these into the sword to reproduce later or to break down to create the perfect unsealing method. The reason why Uzushio was destroyed was that it can know what type of seal a Jinchuriki has and in seconds, create an unsealing method that will unleash the tailed beast in its vicinity." Naruto immediately dropped the sword and in panic looked at the seal in his stomach. Jiraiya did so as well and noted that the Hokage no Fuin Shiki was intact. It's not dangerous to the wielder but to its victim. The Minamoto no Banbutsu is controllable, but its mere implication throughout the ninja world is what sought out the destruction of Uzushio in the first place. Naruto-chan, if you can, never use that blade if you can help it. Especially not in front of those of Iwa, Kiri and Kumo. Shima commented. "We have a lot to report on, do we?" Naruto mentioned with a sigh. Jiraiya did so as well. "I almost forgot, how do we get back?" Naruto asked and Jiraiya had him covered. "Don't worry, your mother left us with instruction on how to get out of this place. She mentioned a secret passageway to a calm belt area that leads directly to Wadatsumi port. Well, let's start sealing up the big guy's ability to absorb natural energy and get back to the port town. No use crying over spilled milk and all. But what should we do about them?" Naruto pointed to Karen and Jugo after the sealing. "We can report them to Konoha and have them come as pals, you know. They can have the necessary information that we can glean on, and with Kabuto with them, we can track down Orochimaru faster." Naruto then turned to Karen. "You okay with that? I can't guarantee you guys will be treated well when we get back, but I guess that's better than being left here to die by that bastard Kabuto." Karen nodded her head, grateful for the blonde's mercy towards them. "Thanks, I didn't think I would be able to live and see the next day when I was with Jugo." Naruto shrugged. "No sweat. I hate what I saw earlier when Kabuto used you and your teammate like pawns. Asshole will get what's coming to him one of these days." Western border. Fire country. Another week has passed, and on the last day of the week of the Taki Shinobi's visit, no envoy came. Strange. The envoy should have been here 2 hours ago. If they don't come, then the supplies will be left to waste and we'll have to transfer them to another border. One of the Konoha Chunin mentioned as Shino adjusted his glasses. By the end of Konoha's border, Shino stood on his own. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. As Shino stood there for a few minutes more, no sign of Taki Shinobi was in sight. Alarm bells were ringing in Shino's head. And it was then that one of his hive colony began acting agitated. It was the scent of a female bug that had let out its pheromones to let them know something. I need to find her. Rippling Future 27. Succession Part 1. The gentle sound of waves crashing to the shores and the soft coolness of the sea breeze finally invaded Jugo's face as he slowly awakened from his slumber. He had never awoken so comfortably before. Most of the time, his sleep involved the cold hard ground of his prisoner when he was forced to do an errand for Orochimaru. He looked to his side and finding out that his clothes were all cleaned and stitched together as best as it could be. He had to wonder how he had gotten here in the first place. There was a knock on the door that brought him out of his musings, and from the door, he saw a tall white-haired man wearing a headband with the character written on it as oil, a green kimono underneath a short red haori and a pair of Geta sandals. How's the feeling coming along? Jugo held his head for a moment and replied, I feel like something stopped squeezing my head after a long while, like something just stopped torturing me. Jugo then noticed a metallic bracer on his right hand with 9 rings that surround the bracer itself. That's a seal me and my student worked with to have your urges sedated to a point that you won't be able to use it as you would like. Why you stopped me from rampaging? Jugo asked, surprised by this, as Jiraiya pointed to the next person who entered the room. It was the blonde-haired kid that he went after earlier. Technically, no. You were already out of control when we put a stop to your rage. We managed to suppress your transformation for now, but we needed to address the main problem. Jiraiya's face turned serious. That's right, you got out of control because of your ability to naturally siphon nature chakra. You may not have noticed it, but your chakra has been a mess before we got to you. That's why you have that bracer now. It regulates the level of chakra that you are able to take in. Currently, the setting is at 0 and you won't be able to modify it unless Naruto allows you to. I modified the Kudan Tetsuan, 9-fold steel sealing method, Naruto mentioned as he pointed to the large boy's wrist and began pantomiming of rotating his wrist with his other hand. The seals have 9 levels of control on how much he can take in natural energy. It limits you on what you can take and what you can do. From what I can understand with Ero Sennin, the amount of chakra that you can take is proportional to how much it affects your mind. Limiting it is about as close as we can get you to control it for now. I asked Ero Sennin if the toads can teach you how to control your powers, but the toads only have a strict policy of teaching only their summoners, and from what Ero Sennin tells me, the saturation of nature chakra there would probably drive you insane. Kid, you just called me Ero Sennin 3 times during that explanation. Shut up, Ero Sennin. You almost married me off, Ero Sennin. If you stopped peeking at the public baths, I'll stop calling you Ero Sennin, Ero Sennin. Now you're just being spiteful. Excuse me. Jugo had cut the 2 off, but why are you letting me have some form of control over this? I willingly surrendered myself to Orochimaru to have this ability of mine gone, but you. Jiraiya was the one who answered, and what good did that do to you? Orochimaru and Kabuto, from what your comrade, Karen told us, helped you calm your urges with drugs without even disclosing to you how it worked. They also made one that will purposely put you in that state. He also cultivated your cells and studied you. He's using your cells to cultivate the enzymes required for his experiments. Naruto then continued, he sees you as an asset. He didn't care about your condition so long as he can sat his twisted sense of curiosity and use your blood as a way to control others. After all the things that you gave up for that, look at how they treated you. They pushed you into a cell, with no light, you got stuck there with nothing but rations given to you under the door. Jiraiya then finished. Orochimaru never did look beyond what he could do. But that is neither here nor there anymore. Naruto has allowed that to you because he thinks your abilities will be an asset back home, as well as the seal is for you to start building up your confidence in one day controlling your urges. Jugo spoke embittered at what he had learned. I was desperate for someone to help me put my urges under control, to kill me if it comes to that point. Orochimaru gave that option to me when I thought nobody else could. I took that chance. Jiraiya looked at Jugo with sympathy for his situation. Being desperate enough to make a deal with the devil was all too common around the continent. He had seen men lose their will and let the world consume them. In Jugo's perspective, what he had to look forward to was nothing short of despair. The fact that someone took that despair and twisted his only light of hope was a tragedy. I understand, and you had nothing going for you because of that. But you're here now, you've been given a chance. A chance to live and do right by your own beliefs. Jiraiya then continued, so be sure to take this new lease on life for the better. Konoha will do right by the sins of one that it produced. Naruto then stepped in. That's why after my training in Myobokuzen, we'll work something out to help you with your control. It was then that another voice had interrupted them. Excuse me, the Konoha shinobi you asked to come here has arrived. They're waiting outside. Naruto and Jiraiya turned to look at the redhead, and Jugo noticed his previous teammate was alive and well. Karen, you're okay, Jugo said as he looked down. I almost killed you last time. For that, I'm sorry. Jugo looked remorseful at what he had almost done. Karen was someone who had been watching his cell as far as he knew. She would be the one who had given him food during her visits. Although Jugo knew she didn't do it out of kindness, at least Karen did her duty enough to warrant to be a constant in Jugo's life. He had thoughts of killing her, slitting her throat and dismembering her, but Jugo restrained his urges as best as he could. To him, Karen was a part of his routine. At least her presence helped him have some form of familiarity after Kimimaro had died. And the blonde standing before him, from what he had come to understand, was the one that killed Kimimaro, the boy who kept him in check all those years ago. Karen nodded and seemed to have accepted Jugo's apology. I know. Naruto and Jiraiya-sama had to help me figure things out while you were unconscious. What Kabuto and Orochimaru did to us, I find it more revolting than what you were about to do. It was fortunate that Naruto and Jiraiya were the ones who faced us. Or else, we don't know what would have happened. I'm just happy I get to live one more day. Karen replied as Naruto grinned. Well, we're as close as family as we could ever have, Karen. We don't have much to say in what we get to have. So I say that the more of us there is, the more I have hope that we can one day rebuild. Naruto had been ecstatic to know that he had a clan member that was alive and well. He certainly didn't want to meet someone under her circumstances, but he thought that beggars couldn't choose. Karen was his family member, there was no denying that. And Uzumaki was an Uzumaki, and her bright red hair certainly was proof of her lineage. He and Karen had talked things over ever since they had met. He had asked about where she actually came from and why she ended up being placed under Orochimaru's group, and he understood that much like the many people that Orochimaru had tried to manipulate, the man had come to when Karen was at her low point and he had coerced the girl into his employ under the guise that she had no place to belong to. It certainly angered Naruto as to how low the snake user was going to go, and people like Karen, who had no glimmer of hope seen in their eyes, were pulled in by Orochimaru's machinations. Jiraiya nodded his head at Karen's announcement and had left the room to meet the Konoha shinobi they requested 2 days earlier. Given the trip that they made, it was impressive that they managed to reach this place in record time. It must be because of the urgency of what Jiraiya and Naruto discovered. Their trip to Uzushio was meant to be a fairly peaceful one, but it hadn't been the case now, obviously. Outside, Jiraiya was met with 3 familiar faces, Shiranui Genma, Namiyashi Raida, and Tatami Iwashi, the Hokage's bodyguards. Tsunade seemed to have acknowledged the importance of their mission and wanted the 2 captured nin to be sent to Konoha as soon as possible. Jiraiya-sama. The 3 stood in attention and Jiraiya motioned towards the door as he said, we'll let them figure things out for a moment. Naruto is explaining the inner workings of the seal we just did on that other kid. Genma raised an eyebrow at this. Strange. It was as if Naruto was being mentioned as a fuinjutsu specialist. Jiraiya grinned. Yes, Naruto isn't the idiot that he's thought of to be, he's actually quite the genius when it comes to fuinjutsu. The 3 held their breaths for a moment. It was no secret in Konoha that they were the bodyguards of the previous Hokage and that they were taught by the 4th Hokage himself about his most famed technique, the Hiraishin. The 3 looked at each other and then back at Jiraiya as Rado was the first to speak. If he's already this involved in fuinjutsu, then might we suggest something? Jiraiya raised his eyebrow and then came up to the conclusion on his own. We want Naruto to learn the Hiraishin. Genma said this as Iwashi nodded as well. Given all accounts, the Hiraishin is a jutsu made by the Nadaime Hokage. But Yondaime-sama had perfected it to such a degree that it has become leagues better than the originator himself. And we think this is Naruto's right to learn now that he can do Fuinjutsu. Jiraiya nodded as well. He then grabbed 3 empty scrolls from his bag and said, "All right, but you should all write them down." Minato never wrote the specifics to his technique when he was alive. But what you have to offer is something we can work with. We'll be able to unlock that no problem at all. Inside the room, Naruto had grabbed 2 scrolls of his own from his bag and gave them to Karen. "What are these?" Karen asked, curious as to what her cousin had given her. "These are 2 scrolls containing Fuinjutsu techniques from our clan. I've read them, but personally, I don't think I have any use for them at this time. And you told me how your skills were only meant for sensing and healing, right? You need these more than I do. The first scrolls is Muin, the second is Mu no Hauko." Naruto placed them firmly on Karen's hands. "What do they do?" Karen asked, and Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment. The Muin is a Fuinjutsu technique that allows you to absorb jutsu, disperse it as chakra to make it as your own. It's only good for one spot and that is the hand. The second is Mu no Hauko. It's a spear made up of the special ore from Uzushio, the same as my sword, but its special ability is to disrupt jutsu with a special seal and destroy it with the tip of the spear. It can also redirect the jutsu it just disrupted. I've read them a few days ago while Jugo was out. These scrolls are meant for our clan. Nobody else can use them, or at least, that's what they say. I have another one, but I haven't read it yet. Maybe when we get back to Konoha I can tell you, but now let's settle with these. Karen looked at Naruto wordlessly before she looked down at the scrolls in her hands. "You know, I've always wondered." Naruto looked at her curiously as Karen continued, "Why are you so nice to us? What did we even do to deserve your kindness, Naruto? What's with all this? Is it because you feel some sort of pity? I don't get it. We share the same last name, but that's about it. After that is just a string of affiliations that your village would rather burn down. What's in this for you?" Naruto tilted his head a little as if wondering why Karen was questioning his motives. "Don't give me that look. I don't know if you're playing dumb or just an idiot, but what you're doing, I don't understand. How come you can be so trusting that you're willing to give Jugo a chance to control himself and giving away our family treasures to a complete stranger entirely? What's your deal?" Naruto shrugged. "I don't have any of that, Karen. I just think that if I want to be Hokage, then I have to consider everyone I meet, think of what they're going through, and come up with the best solution that I can think of. I just want what's best for everyone." "Naruto." Jugo called out to him and added, "Karen is right, what you're doing is naive. You're willingly giving us a chance without doubting what we do. Do our words not bring doubt into what you just heard? Remember, we served Orochimaru. And the price of that?" Naruto asked as he looked serious at the two. Karen and Jugo didn't have an answer and Naruto nodded. "That's what I thought. Maybe you're right, maybe I should doubt you. But Kabuto never thought twice of abandoning you. He threw you two away like trash. They have all that they need to get out of you if they would just sacrifice you like this. And in my view, sacrifice has to mean something not like what Orochimaru and Kabuto did to you. If you view yourself like that, then your life would be worthless to everyone. That's why I'm not like Orochimaru. I don't want to use you as tools, I want you two to be every bit as human as you could ever be. Because that's what a Hokage does, put his people first before himself." Karen looked down. She had indeed made the choice to serve Orochimaru out of despair. She had no other choice in the matter. It was to live and be a servant or be a prisoner or as a test subject. She had seen the lives of the people Orochimaru had put in cages and they terrified her. For Jugo, who had only known nothing but a life of fear, to see someone so self-assured was a wonder to behold. Naruto was different from Kimimaro and the boy did things differently. Whereas Kimimaro's brand of mercy had promised him death, Naruto had promised him freedom. Freedom from this curse. And now knowing what caused his urges in the first place, Jugo was given a chance to make right by this new lease on life. Knowing is half the battle. Jugo noted as he finally got up from his bed and bowed to Naruto deeply. "I am forever in your debt." Karen turned to Jugo, surprised as to what Naruto had done for the large boy. "Karen, Sensing her own choice to live a better life, finally looked up at Naruto and used her Kagura Shingen, Mind Eye of the Divine Entertainment, for the first time since meeting him. His chakra was vast, like an endless ocean. Wide and deep. And it was warm too, a soothing feeling of being embraced, of safety and assurance. She had never felt chakra like this before. Just the feeling alone reminded her of her dear mother who Orochimaru had killed. A lone tear escapes her eyes, the memories of her mother came back and the warmth of Naruto's chakra seemed to start healing her pain slowly. She too bowed to Naruto's presence. Thank you. It was then that the four adults outside had entered the room. Naruto looked at them and the blonde nodded. Done with your explanation? Jiraiya asked and Naruto nodded. Yeah, we should probably head to Myobokuzen now after this. Naruto then went for his bag and the three Chunin in the area faced both Karen and Jugo. Tenbin no Jugo and Uzumaki Karen, I presume. Genma asked the two and said teenagers nodded. Genma motioned for Rado and Iwashi to his sides and said, we're taking you directly to Hokage-sama, grab your things and let's go. The two nodded and soon found themselves surrounded by the three Chunin-level shinobi who had their hands held together at their middle and index fingers. Hey, what are they? And soon vanished in a blur that surprised Naruto. What the hell was that? Jiraiya smirked at the blonde and held 3 scrolls in his right hand. Your next lesson after Senjutsu. With that, both Naruto and Jiraiya disappeared in a plume of smoke as well. Western Fire Country border. Night had fallen in this part of the continent. Shino turned to look at his comrades who were now preparing for the night. He had told them that he wasn't particularly in the mood of socializing tonight, so he went to his room at the outpost and began preparing. One strange happening was fluke, twice means a pattern. And from the way how his insects had reacted earlier, his gut feeling has told him of something not good. Shino began checking his equipment. He counted his supplies and opened the window from his room. He was stopped when he sensed the presence of one of his comrades. Kohai, you're not planning on going to Taki, aren't you? Shino looked at the man and said, how did you know? The man smiled and said, we know when something is wrong. But unfortunately, our treaty states that we can't cross borders to Taki as part of that agreement. We're not allowed or we'd break that alliance. If you're going to go into Taki anyway, I would suggest surrendering your forehead protector here. Shino raised an eyebrow at this and nodded. Sacrificing an accessory was livable compared to regretting to save a friend. Don't worry, it's just to protect our village. We wouldn't want any international incidents now, would we? Now get going, save the girl. Shino nodded and jumped from his window. The older Chunin smiled and closed the door to Shino's room, locking it up from the inside before doing so. Outside at the campfire, the man said to his group, Shino can't make it, guys. He says he's skipping dinner. He didn't feel quite good. Missing that tacky girl is probably the reason. One of them mused and the others laughed. Man, you noticed that too. I thought I was the only one. Only an idiot wouldn't notice. Guess we'll just have to cheer him up tomorrow. Shino crossed the border in record time and let his Kikaichu do the rest. His tracking abilities had improved since training with Team 8. They were trained to become a reconnaissance team meant for undercover missions no matter the weather temperament. Shino wasn't blind when he was placed in the same team as Kiba, and Inuzuka, whose clan had specialized on tracking down and hunting enemies, and Hinata, the Hyuga, whose eyes were meant for long-range visualization of enemy numbers. And now, when he must look for his friend, Shino was relying to every bit of training that he had learned from Kurenai. Minutes turned to hours, 1 hour to 2, then 3, then 4. As he got closer, the scent of the female insect that let out those pheromones became stronger and stronger, his hive getting angrier and angrier. A few more hours passed and Shino figured to get some rest at a large branch. The silence of the forest was deafening on his ears. Alone, on unfamiliar territory and in the middle of the night. Shino looked up. He felt a cold, chill wind escaped him. The small break had made him collect his bearings. His breath escaped his lips. He looked up with the pale moonlight guiding his way, but not for long. Rain was gathering above. Shino needed to hurry. The scent will only be viable until the rain starts pouring. Shino grabbed a food pill from his pouch and jumped from the branch as he popped it in his mouth. The effect was immediate as chakra flooded into his system twofold. Shino leapt from another branch, the air got colder and small drops of rain fell from the sky. Shino remained calm, but inside he was starting to feel anxious. He didn't know if he was at halfway point, but he needed to move forward. For Fu, Konoha. Inuzuka Kiba had arrived at Konoha a few weeks ago. After a scolding he could never forget and then turned to surprise showing the dog contract, Sum had let him off for now. The Inuzuka matriarch had him grounded and had been cleaning kennels for the better part of the week. When he started taking missions again, he was surprised that Shino was sent on his own for a long-term mission, and due to some mishap, Kiba was now stuck in the village with only training to pass his time. Sum once again scolded him for wasting time and advised him to look for other, more productive means of using time. Kiba had never thought about much in his shinobi career, only that he had to advance in rank and proclaim himself Hokage after beating everyone else. Tamaki had returned after she came after shopping and visiting her cousin who was coincidentally out of town that time. So spending time with her was definitely a plus, even though he got on the receiving end of her mom's sharpshooter. The pain was totally worth it for having an unofficial date with Tamaki, who assured him of another good time if she came and visit. A lecherous smile escaped his lips for a moment before he shook his head to get his mind out of the gutter and looked around. Since his peers were doing God knows what, Kiba decided to listen in on the rumors about the bustling life of his village. Hey, did you hear about Uchiha Sasuke? Apparently he got into Anbu a few months ago. Oh gosh, yes, I heard about that. Young and already within the elite of the elite. Oh, what a dream boat. Kiba's happy mood instantly vanished to be replaced by the green-eyed monster. Just like Hyuga Neji, right? I heard he got promoted to Chunin recently. I can honestly see that in him. Actually, he's pretty astute, too. A little too girly looking, but he's definitely one to look out for. Kiba's eyebrow twitched a little. Even his peers a little over a year older than him were getting in on the popularity shine too. That's nothing. Nara Shikamaru is now directly apprenticed by his own father. You ever see a man outwit anyone? I doubt those two can compare to an actual next in line to be the Chunin commander. A little lazy looking on my book, but I doubt it would deter you, Shiho-san. I know that a man with a brain and looking like he is about to get a position of power gets you all hot and bothered. Don't say it like that. Even Shikamaru too. Okay. Screw this. At least Naruto wasn't ahead of him right now, that's for sure. Hey man, have you heard about the news? Apparently Jiraiya-sama discovered a genius in sealing. What? Another fourth Hokage in the making. Sweet. I bet in a few years we'd be back on our feet for that. Do you know who it is? Kiba leaned in. Details are hush-hush for now. Tsunade-sama doesn't let anyone know about it, but apparently, it's Jiraiya-sama's new apprentice, you know, Naruto. Did you say Naruto? That cute kid who won against Neji in the exams? The guy who beat that monster from Suna? The guy who brought back Tsunade-sama herself? Yeah, it's too bad that he got with that Hyuga, though, what I wouldn't give to look at those beautiful blue eyes and get lost in them. Kiba wanted to punch something. He wanted to punch something right now. But before he could act on his emotions, Kiba began to think clearly. His peers were getting ahead of him and they were getting into areas that were really specialized for their cases. Kiba looked down. Other than ranking up, he never thought twice to look about in different avenues to advance his career. Sasuke, Neji and even Shikamaru and Naruto were getting into areas that would normally put them through a rigorous litmus test. But what was he, other than some damn kid that had as big of a dream as his rival? There was nothing that Kiba could think about entering. Kiba then arrived at the Shinobi library, and noticed a slightly long line of familiar-looking faces in front of him. To his surprise, Kurenai was standing in line too, probably about to see what the fuzz is all about. Ah, sensei, is there something you're getting at the library today? Kurenai nodded. It's the middle of the year. This is the time we get updates from the bingo book to see the list of dangerous missing or foreign nin that we need to watch out for. As the bingo book reserved for Chunin and above. Kurenai smiled and shook his head. No, Kiba, the bingo book is meant for all shinobi, but specifically, Chunin or higher. Come to think of it, this is your first year as Chunin along with Hinata and Shino, right? Well then, how about I treat you all and buy you 3 a book each to help you watch out for if ever you're asked to do a mission outside our borders. It would certainly help you and your team a lot. I was actually thinking of buying each for my little scamps myself. Kakashi had butt in, now behind Kurenai, Asuma and Guy behind them. Curse you and your hip ways, Kakashi. You're first in line before me. What was odd was that Kakashi was punctual for once. But Kiba didn't know that. Asuma then added just behind Kakashi. Anyway, it's a good way to be updated on the latest info on the list. The bingo book is meant to give not just Hunter Nin a head start in information and bounty, it also gives us basic protocols on what to do if we do encounter them. That's Konoha's bingo book, anyway. The intelligence division is responsible of letting the publisher know of the updates they currently have. Certainly is a nice way to keep the funding there up. There's also the shared intelligence of dangerous shinobi outside Hino Kuni too. Many of them are considered a threat because of the information that they have. You notice it by how the reward is higher than most even for well-known and dangerous shinobi like Itachi and Kisame. Guy added with a shine of his pearly whites. Now there's a thought of what he could do. As a tracker, he is expected to chase after targets and either subdue or kill. Being a hunter nin certainly is a good prospect for his skill set. A few minutes later, Kiba eagerly awaited Kurenai by the side of the store and she handed Kiba the book with a smile. As Kiba flipped through the pages, he saw all kinds of shinobi and their profiles. The information inside them were much more detailed than Kabuto's ninja info cards, probably because the list inside were made up of very dangerous or very important shinobi. The listed people were probably too valuable. Some even go as high as 10 million ryo. He looked at the picture and it was the picture of Uchiha Itachi, the butcher of the Uchiha clan. His head was worth 10 million ryo. Kiba had to steer clear away from that. It was obvious that those whose bounties were reaching millions were not the kind of people he would want to mess with. At least, not for now. But someday. That's strange. Kakashi quipped. The attention of the Chunin instructors were on to the masked man as Kakashi looked down on his copy. The Tsuchikage's son, granddaughter and bodyguard are here in the list. Have they gone rogue? If so, why? Everyone turned their pages to where Kakashi was pointing at, and there indeed was a profile of the aforementioned people. Indeed. The line of succession of the Tsuchikage is more monarchical, yes. Then what would push Onoki to put his successors onto the bingo book? Guy asked to no one in particular, but all of them couldn't come up with answers. I don't like this one bit. The last time a monarch went missing, people went to war. Asuma scowled. He remembers that the Sandaime Cage's incident was what triggered their bloodiest war yet. But they are listed in the page where they are priority targets for Iwa on the kill list. I doubt Iwa will go to war after putting a bounty on their heads. Kurenai mentioned, earning a nod from the rest of the group. Wars are triggered for less. Kakashi warned. Kiba had to gulp at Kakashi's implication. Silence remained with the group until the same Cyclops Chunin continued, I'm having a team meeting tomorrow. Training can't wait. Kakashi, this is not our time anymore. You don't suppose that an all-out war can happen, do you? Asuma asked this to the man who simply shrugged. Call it a hunch. Taki no Kuni. Shino had been running since last night, not stopping for anything but a drink or when he was reaching his limit. Shino had to admit, all that stamina training did good on his person. It certainly helped him here. Pretty soon, it was raining again, now much more intense. The scent of the female bug's pheromone was increasing as well even though it was raining. It was faint but noticeable. Shino had to wonder, was he getting close to Fu's village? Now the scent of the female bug was slowly replaced by something else, the smell of rust and iron. It was the smell of blood. Quickly, he turned to his side to see where he got that last scent from. He looked down and found a dead Taki shinobi on the forest floor. A feeling of dread escapes within Shino. As not too far away from this body, another was present, and the body was near unrecognizable seeing as it was burned to a crisp. The scent of the female bug was not on it, so the body wasn't Fu. From what he could tell from his colony, the scent was still active. He immediately gave chase. As he passed through the trees, he could see bodies becoming more and more common. He could tell that they were fresh. The stench of decay had yet to linger. It was safe to say that whoever or whatever it was that attacked these shinobi, they needed to be taken seriously. A thought crossed his mind then. What if it was Akatsuki? The cold chill in his back became more prominent. The thought of S-class nuke nin doing this much damage to a single village, even if minor, speaks of their skill. And as the bodies continued to pile up, the idea that Akatsuki may be responsible were becoming more and more likely. As he finally reached a waterfall, Shino noted the bodies ever more present. He had seen at least 50 shinobi were now dead from his first discovery. Some were burned alive, some were shredded, and others were crushed or their heads twisted. The horrifying scene left him anxious, and inside his level-headed approach was about to shut down. At the basin of the waterfall were floating dead bodies. Blood seemed to turn the lake to a red hue. He dreaded thinking of entering the waterfall, but stopped when his colony were pointing at another direction. Shino raised his eyebrow. Did Fu escape? Now that question brought forth some hope within Shino. He just needed to find Fu before Akatsuki does. Shino leapt towards the direction that the scent was coming from. Inside Tokigakure, a massacre was occurring. Hundreds of people lay dead as two figures wearing black cloaks with red clouds emblazoned on them were walking sedately from the destruction they had caused. A minor village thinking that it could take on Akatsuki. What a joke. A man with a mask spoke. His teal-green eyes shifted left and right after strangling a man to death, and another had his chest pierced. This is the most fun I've had since joining this shithole club. Ha 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 ha. Bleed for Jashin-sama, you fucking heathens. A man with slicked back silver hair laughed manically as he disemboweled another person, a civilian by the looks of it, and bleed all over the ground. His victim screamed in agony as he bled to death, with the silver-haired man stepping on the person's head and squishing it beneath his feet. His smile was ever present as he brought another victim to his violent god. Damn Akatsuki, Shibuki muttered. Even with the help of the hero water, these two still couldn't be beaten. He looked at the two with hatred in his eyes. His village, his people, dead from the ensuing massacre. Konoha had warned them. The Akatsuki was a force not to be taken lightly, but he had never thought that these monsters were capable of such destruction. And then he got a look of one of its members. A forehead protector with the insignia of Tokigakure, slashed in the middle to note that he was a nuke nin, a shinobi who betrayed their village. Tokigakure did not produce such a ninja. Many of their shinobi were loyal to the core, and anyone who had an idea of betraying the village was killed almost immediately. Their secret police made sure of that. Not many escaped the clutches of the village and its secrets. But they did have one. There was a story about a man who volunteered to assassinate the Shodaime Hokage, Senju Hashirama. Foolish as it is to think about now, the time of the warring clans was a time filled with men and women who did everything they could to amass power, even if their goals were next to near impossible. And this man was the man who first tried and failed. He went back to his home, defeated, and in act to appease Konoha, the first leader of the village decreed this man be sentenced to death. It was a cruel way to act just for the preservation of the village. But it must do what it needed at the time to ensure their survival, or the threat of not just Senju Hashirama come knocking on their doorstep, but also the more vicious and merciless Uchiha Madara. He knew of this man. This was the man that had escaped the judgment of Tokigakure. This was Kakuzu, the butcher. He blurted out, tired and weak. The hero's water had left him for dead after he couldn't overcome the force of the man's jutsu. So, at least one of you brats remember me. The man with the mask, now known as Kakuzu, mentioned as he was approached by the man. So that's why you knew where you could strike and bypass most of our security measures. You were one of the architects of the village. Shibuki said weakly as Kakuzu raised the man by the hem of his clothes. I am. And I haven't forgotten how the village treated me like disposable trash after wimping out of the plan to assassinate the Shodaime Hokage. Tell me, does this village still see me as a traitor? The sins of our ancestors shouldn't reflect on their children. For what it's worth, even if it is meaningless now, Tokigakure owes you an apology. Kakuzu scoffed it off. The dead have no idea how to apologize. This village does not have the right to sit on its moral high ground. Unfortunate for you, that being the leader of this dead village will be your legacy as a mark on shinobi history, a sacrifice for Akatsuki. Kakuzu chuckled a little. Seeing this village burn to the ground brought forth a sense of catharsis he never knew he had. Rest assured, you will be the one of many hearts that I collect today, but for even giving kind words, even if it is meaningless, I will have you as one of my most valuable hearts, after you tell me where the Jinchuriki is. Black tendrils then popped up from the man as they slowly made their way to Shibuki. Hey, Kakuzu, I managed to get one of these shitheads to talk. Ha 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 ha, you should have seen the way he peed himself. Didn't even hesitate to tell me where they stowed the Jinchuriki away. Kakuzu looked at his partner, soaked and covered by the blood of his victims, playing with the head of one of the shinobi he beheaded. It seems you learn a thing or two about competence. I may have you survive yet, Hidan. Shibuki looked on in despair as Kakuzu had his black tendrils suddenly spike out and pierced Shibuki everywhere but his heart. As Shibuki fades into the darkness, he cries for his village, for his men, for Fu. Shibuki then went limp as Kakuzu tore the man's chest apart and with it, the man's heart. The black tendrils then surrounded the heart and obscured it from Kakuzu's vision. The tendrils convulsed and then stopped after a minute. A white porcelain mask then appears, blue streaks covering as a design and the shape took form as that of a swordfish. Let's go find that Jinchuriki. I think you've had enough fun for today. Spoil sport. You could have at least let me kill that guy. His soul was worth more than any of these scrubs. I don't care. Outside the village, Shino had finally tracked down to where his colony was pointing at. It was a creek just behind a mountain range. He could see a figure by the riverbed, unconscious. Shino immediately ran to the person's spot and wave of relief had hit him. It was Fu. Fu, wake up. Fu mumbled in her sleep. No Shibuki-sama, don't throw me away. I promise, I'll be good, I can defend the village too. It was probably too late. And judging by how fresh the corpses were, Akatsuki may still be inside the village. He needed to get Fu out of here and fast. Hoping against all hope, Shino bit one of his fingers and performed the technique, gathering as much chakra as he could and poured everything he had on it. Kuchio's no jutsu. A large plume of smoke erupted from Shino's person and as the smoke cleared, Shino could have breathed a sigh of relief once more as the blue giant 100-meter-tall horn beetle spoke to him. I am Tadamaru, the shield of the emperor and the younger brother of Yarimaru, the emperor's spear. What would you have me do, summoner? Konoha, take us there. Shino could now feel the aftereffects of chakra exhaustion. He began breathing heavily as Shino pointed to the east, to the land of fire. It shall be done. The carapace then stretches wide and folded wings appear. From behind the beetle, Shino could see chakra collecting and becoming visible. The summoned creature then lifts off without warning as it flew into the skies and lifted Shino back to Konoha. Shino looked back at Tokigakure. Now nothing more than a giant gravesite of dead humans. A colony has been snuffed. Shino closed his eyes to say his prayers to the dead and then he looked forward. Tokigakure may have fallen, but hope will live on. Konoha. A set of important people in Iwa being labeled as missing nin, to Jinchuriki at the same time went into hiding. Tsunade read the reports coming from her intelligence division and then another just popped up earlier courtesy of Jiraiya and Naruto, just after being presented with two captured and seemingly reformed Odo nin, a boy and a girl, with the girl claiming to be Uzumaki. Things were moving too fast to her liking. As she read the deciphered letters from the Toad Sage and his apprentice, Tsunade had to immediately call the intelligence and strategic commanders again for the fourth time this week. The damn pervert and his equally notorious brat gives me more reason to drink every damn time they make a goddamn report. I hope to high heaven that those two are in Myobokuzen now because I swear to my ancestors if I get another damn revelation, I'm going to be snapping his spine like a fucking twig. In Myobokuzen, a middle-aged white-haired man suddenly felt a cold chill in his spine. As Tsunade read the letters again and again, she couldn't believe what she was reading. You called for us, Hokage-sama. Shikaku asked. Inoichi and Ibiki were behind him. I can't just catch a break with my stupid teammate and his equally stupid apprentice. The three men in the room sighed. Ibiki was the first to ask to get things over with, what now? Tsunade tossed them the scroll. And all three of them began to read it. Silence overtook them for a brief moment and it was cracked when Ibiki couldn't contain his amusement any longer. Naruto had tattled on their spymaster. Aside from the power structure flipping revelations, Tsunade-sama, I would like to congratulate your successor for his future marriage. It's not happening and you know it. When I get my hands on that bastard, this whole building is going to flip on his head. Tsunade angrily shouted as Inoichi gestured for the angry Hokage to calm down knowing that she can do that feat and probably will follow through with it when her teammate gets back. Please don't do that. So what do we know of this Minamoto no Banbutsu? Shikaku asked. A smile plastered on his face, reading about how Jiraiya had passed the buck of his problem to his apprentice as a form of levity compared with how Naruto had discovered an apparent superweapon that could flip the whole power dynamic between the 5 villages. I'm having one of the Anbu look at the records during the Second War concerning Uzushio. By my guess, the normal files were redacted and Sarutobi-sensei deemed it necessary to keep it a secret from most of us. From his descriptions here, I'd say there is still more that we don't know, not just Minamoto no Banbutsu, but a special scroll named Takamagahara as well. Inoichi commented with a hand on his chin. It was a good thing that the whole room was silenced, or there would be consequences by the form of one ruthless warhawk. One after another. It's as if something is coming at us and is gaining speed as we speak. That's not something good, either. With the information we have now of the Tsuchikage's legitimate heirs missing, I shudder to think that this might be another cause for war. Shikaku replied. We'll have to speed up our work against Danzo and Orochimaru then. We can't keep fighting on multiple fronts, something has to give so that we can focus on the next target. Ibiki thought, it was a good thing he had Ino start her next operation on their target. Who do you recommend we strike first? Inoichi asked to Ibiki as the man grinned. Isn't it obvious, Inoichi-san? We're going after Danzo first. Konoha Hospital, Lecture Hall. Sakura sighed as she stretched from her seat with her hands to wake herself up. 2 weeks. It had been 2 weeks of spending time with Sasuke in his home, and for that 2 weeks, the Uchiha had mentioned that his nightmares were gone now. Her regimen of drug prescriptions and therapy seemed to work, and with tips from Ino, they were able to let Sasuke have some peace. Still, nothing seemed to happen in between them for that 2 weeks, even with Sasuke off of the medications. Sakura would notice the small gestures, but Sakura dismissed all that in favor of thinking that Sasuke was just trying to be a good host, even if it was part of her teammates' emotional healing. After the intervention she had done, Sakura went back home in order to leave Sasuke to his own devices. She might have feelings for Sasuke, but she needed to be home for her parents. The time she shared with Sasuke seemed more professional than anything else. Their team meetings have been better, though. Seeing as Sai had finally stopped trying to get under their skin. He seemed to have developed some form of calling them nicknames as well, the same mannerisms that Naruto had when talking to other people. Training has been way too rigorous lately. Speaking of Ino, Sakura turned to her best friend who was slumping on her desk. Ino looked exhausted from her schedule. With training with her father, her team and the lectures here, it seemed Ino's competitive streak was tiring her out. You know, you could just drop the course here, Ino. I don't see the point of trying to take on too many things at once. You'll tire yourself out. Ino snapped back at her best friend, and lose to you. Listen, Sakura, I'll thank you for the advice, but I'm not losing to you, and I will beat you even to where you're good at too. Is that why you took up the sword too? For goodness sake, Ino, we're not 12 anymore. You're taking this rivalry way too far. So you can have Sasuke-kun all to yourself. Hell no, Sakura. Ino countered. Ino, look at yourself. You're focusing on way too many things. Medical ninjutsu is a demanding course. You need to commit or else you'll fail. Pick one thing, Ino, and stick to it. I can't have you collapsing on the ground one day with all the shit you're trying to do, please. Ino looked at Sakura with a glare and then smirked, says the girl who studies medical ninjutsu and kenjutsu at the same time. Okay then, forehead girl, let's have deal. How about we do a team exercise? My team against yours, winner gets to spend time with Sasuke-kun. Sakura looked at Ino with a flat look as if Sasuke would even agree to the proposal. You're joking, right? I know Sasuke. He wouldn't waste his time on dates and flirting. He's as romantic as a washboard. Like your chest, right? My chest has nothing to do with how Sasuke feels. Sakura angrily replied back. A little bit of Tsunade had leaked out of her. A bit embarrassed that out of her peers, she had yet to grow there. Like you're one to talk. Anyway, I know you spent 2 weeks alone with Sasuke-kun in his home. And you don't give his name honorifics anymore. I know something happened. Don't lie to me, Sakura. Sakura was grinding her teeth in frustration. There wasn't Ino pig. Nothing happened. Sasuke asked for help and I gave it to him. He's not the type to ask a girl out so they could fool around in his place. Oh, so it just happened that you two were living in cohabitation in his home. I wasn't born yesterday, Sakura. Ino said with a flattened tone. Sakura just gave a sigh and replied, whatever, think what you like, Ino pig, if it's eating at you during the night, then I guess it's my win. In your dreams, Ino said before she looked up and thought of something else. You know, it's been a while since we got together ever since Naruto left. I don't think we've met and talked to each other since then. Sakura's expression changed from puzzlement to wonder. Ino was right, they had never relaxed ever since Naruto left and they all became Chunin. Their celebrations were held by their teams, not as an entire group. Shikamaru. Naruto and Shino weren't there because Shikamaru and Shino were on missions that time and Naruto wasn't there for obvious reasons. I guess we can relax now and then maybe you could meet our new teammate. Sakura replied. She didn't notice Ino's gaze sharpened for a second before returning back to her cheerful expression. That's great. What's your teammate like, by the way? The moment she asked, Sakura's expression changed from thoughtful to downright grating, as if she wanted to strangle this person. In a word, infuriating. He's the kind of person who pisses people off like nobody's business. He called me ugly once, they had to scrape him off a rock to get him out. Well, if he pisses you off, then I'm sure we'll get along swimmingly. Ino replied with a grin on her face as Sakura smirked at that. Oh, you think so, huh? Well, we'll make sure you meet him then. Sakura couldn't wait for the day Ino met Sai. Maybe she'd pull her hair out in frustration as well. Whatever, forehead girl, I like this guy already. Your taste in men are weird, Ino. Hello Pot, this is Kettle, she's currently out right now, would you like to leave a message? Ino asked and Sakura sighed as she placed a hand on her face. Well played, Ino. I just hope you brought an antihypertensive when you get to meet him. As the two planned their meetup, they noticed it was already high noon. Ino waved goodbye to Sakura as she went outside the hospital while Sakura did her rounds. She had heard that Tenten was confined today after battling against a bunch of convicted prisoners the other day. A little bit of pride swelled within her friend. Tenten was making waves around the village as much as her other friends were. Girl power and all that. Ino, meanwhile, as she got out of the hospital, saw a large 100-meter tall beetle fly over Konoha's skies. She looked at it as it headed towards the Hokage tower. Fast in her wits, she jumped to the nearest rooftop until it disappeared in a plume of smoke as it landed beside the tower. What on earth had just occurred? Kiba, who had been walking towards home, looked at the beetle above his head and along with Akamaru, ran forward as fast as he can towards the tower. Outside the village, Hinata saw the creature as it flew over the skies and worriedly, she looked at her companions. We must hurry back to the village, now. Hinata said calmly as the three Hyuga obeyed. She had decided to take the long route home to see Nami no Kuni once again and in there, trained to her heart's content and decided to know the deeds of her beloved on why a bridge was named after him. It was sort of a pilgrimage as she trained with Hanabi as well, with Ko and Natsu supervising their training. Shikamaru fell flat on his butt as a giant horned beetle just landed in front of his office. With this, everyone was alerted to take action, but soon relaxed when the giant summon had disappeared in plume of white smoke. What the hell? Shikamaru asked to no one in particular. His staff members were just as puzzled as he was. In another part of the village, Sasuke stood atop the Naka shrine hill looking at the giant summon. His senses were prepared if a fight were to break out but visibly relaxed when the summon had disappeared from the tower. Something has happened. Falcon surmised as he sat down underneath the shade of the tree of the hill. He looked on as Sasuke remained silent. There's movement within the village. Falcon then continued as Sasuke turned to the man and continued, what would you have me do? We're on standby. The intelligence division has been giving off signals to the different sections of the village military. They're preparing for something big, something that could affect this village for years to come. You think someone is moving against us and using the intelligence division? Falcon scoffed at that and replied, the intelligence division is probably the only branch in the army that is more loyal than the Anbu. They are a secretive bunch, cloak and dagger ops that make even the most seasoned of Anbu veterans question loyalty. They know their stuff, Taka. They know who our enemies are, within or outside the walls of our home. And that summon. Nothing to do with ours or what the intelligence division is cooking up. It's more likely an emergency from one of our border outposts. Falcon then handed Sasuke a scroll in his hands. Congratulations in graduating Anbu training. You are now recognized as both an operative and a Chunin of this village. We will need your skill now more than ever. And missions? Sasuke asked as Falcon shook his head. You are my eyes in this village, Taka. If a mission does come, your assignment will most likely be within these walls. If Sasuke were younger, this would have caused an outrage for him. Being stuck in the village meant that he was being sidelined from the real missions. But he knew better now. operations within the village was more difficult than operating outside. Falcon was acknowledging his skill as one of the best the Anbu has produced. A well of pride surged within Sasuke. Someone else had recognized his skill, someone whose respect mattered. He felt like, for the first time in years, a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. At the office of the Hokage herself, there kneeled Shino. In his arms was a teal-haired girl with tan skin and a yellow tank top that showed off her abdomen and a short skirt with a large red scroll on her back. She had never pegged for the straight-laced Aburame boy to be the type to pick up foreign girls during a mission, but the sense of urgency within the boy seemed to have put those things at the back of her mind. Her name is Fu and she is a Jinchuriki like Naruto. She's from Tokigakure and Tokigakure, the village itself, has fallen. It was then that Shino finally crumpled to the floor and fell unconscious. The amount of chakra he used when he summoned that creature must have taken a toll on him. Get me Shizune, have 2 beds ready for admission for these 2. Ibiki, Shikaku, with me. Inoichi, get into the streets. I know all abled shinobi just saw what happened, have them be reminded of an emergency assembly 2000 hours tonight sharp. Get me Hatake Kakashi and made a guy here front and center. And all at once the shinobi had jumped into action. Akatsuki had acted way ahead of schedule. Unknown location. A gathering of criminals was beginning at this cave. The 9 members of Akatsuki all appeared as an apparition to talk and share information. I see, the Nanabi had escaped. I apologize for that error. We should have focused on the Jinchuriki rather than the village. It matters not, Tokigakure is an important ally of Konoha. With it gone, we have dealt a blow enough that 2 of the major powers is left reeling. AIM will reap the benefits for this event. The location of the Jinchuriki. Konoha. What about Iwa, Hiri and Kumo? Iwa is not our problem. Hiri is a fangless tiger and Kumo is all that is left before Suna and Konoha. Should we move things up to schedule? Yeah. Only for Iwa. The rest will follow. We have a problem. Someone had discovered the Geto Mazo and got away. One of my caretakers managed to scare them off but not before seeing the statue. A mistake then. Can we move that statue to AIM? Only if we have enough manpower to move that thing underground. Move it to AIM. As you command. Konoha will likely close its western border and move its outpost to Kawa no Kuni to reach Suna. I would advise against doing anything drastic now. The western border will be filled with high-ranking shinobi. So we leave that part of their border alone. We can probably enter the country by the north in Shimo no Kuni, Frost Country, and Kusa no Kuni if we wish to infiltrate the Hai no Kuni. I'll take your suggestion in mind, Itachi. Rippling 28. Succession Part 2. Shino felt heavy. He woke up in the hospital, his arms feeling like being weighed down by boulders due to his chakra exhaustion. He looked down to his bed, a sense of accomplishment entered him. Shino. His thoughts were derailed as a voice soon made its presence known belonging to Sakura, wearing her red tank top and black shorts. Her elbows were supported by a pair of khaki pads and hands covered with black gloves with the rest of her equipment left at home, a pair of shin guards covered knees that were padded with a sturdy material too. Shino looked at the bubble-gum-haired girl and acknowledged her presence with a nod. Sakura was looking serious at him as she was holding a clipboard. How long was I unconscious? Shino asked as Sakura answered him. You were out for 6 hours. The staff had stabilized you to put your chakra in a more manageable condition, however, Shizune-san prohibited you from any use of chakra for a few days. It is still dangerously low. Thanks to the wonders of an improved medical facility within the hospital under Tsunade's care, chakra exhaustion was a lot more manageable these days and the procedure that allowed for such had drastically reduced the time of putting patients inside the hospital to put them in a more stable condition. Shino nodded and replied, I'll keep that in mind. More to the point, Sakura added as she began writing down at the clipboard in her hands. Tsunade Shisho informed me about what happened earlier and the implications of what you did. You forsook a foreign treaty in your operations and now you are being heavily guarded by Anbu outside of this room. We need to know exactly why you would break ranks and decided to go on an excursion through foreign territory. Thus, Shino began to tell his account of the story from the time he set off to Taki until his decision to bring Fu back to Konoha. To say that Sakura was shocked was an understatement. For a shinobi to be ridiculously powerful enough to take down an entire village armed to the teeth was a frightening thought. An entire army, soundly destroyed by Akatsuki. They were up against real monsters. Hiding from Shino's view was Sasuke. Sakura could see the boy as she was alerted by one of the operatives that Sasuke would be listening in. Tsunade had instructed her that there will be circumstances where the patient would have to disclose sensitive information that Anbu were keen on listening to as well. The intelligence division had advised her to not mention a thing about Anbu presence that were listening in. The less Shino knew of that, the better. Sakura had questioned why they would do that to one of their own comrades, and the intelligence division had awarded her question with a straight answer for her trouble. Shino broke standard protocol. And although that was a relatively minor offense, the scale of which Shino had done so leaves room for visible doubt, and such would jeopardize the village's reputation to its allies. Something that they needed to have right now. And what is Fu to you? According to your statement, she's Taki's Jinchuriki, isn't she? Shino gave another nod. I am only suspecting. But her mannerisms and her behavior suggests a pattern similar to Naruto. I hope you know what I am implying. Sakura nodded. In the days that Tsunade had her read books about the human body including the mind, she noted peculiar behaviors associated with one form of trauma or another, and although behavior was something still new and with few studies under their belt, it sure allowed her to see patterns to recognize. Is it the constant need for attention? Shino looked up and shrugged. The way she speaks. She often tells me stories about the outside world, but not a lot of people were in them. Very few, and oftentimes, she never repeats them when she speaks. She is sociable, but her interactions are more about staving off her loneliness rather than it is by merely asking for attention. Sakura nodded and added, she never left you alone, huh? Shino gave a nod. She's a persistent person. And she doesn't want to come off as someone who acts weird. Sakura smiled and seemed to understand Fu's thinking process, because she'd lose the people that she wants to befriend. Shino nodded and Sakura asked, so why did she choose you? Shino answered straight, that, I don't know. Shino was silent for a few seconds as he asked, how is she? Sakura answered, she's doing fine, physically, but she's in room 226, just at the corner down the hall to your left. We needed to find out why you had to go to Taki and get her, aside from what you said. Shino gave another nod and then asked, am I in trouble? Sakura looked to her side discreetly and saw a nod from Sasuke, who was wearing his Anbu uniform and mask, and nodded. Your statement corroborates with what Fu mentioned. Taki was indeed invaded, and it indeed was Akatsuki. There isn't a treaty anymore since no one on the other side can uphold that end of the bargain, so you're not in trouble. We just wanted to confirm, and you seem to have discarded your forehead protector. It was my only safeguard in the off chance an incident occurs. My forehead protector is a price worth paying if I could know what happened to her. Did you see anyone from Akatsuki when you were there? Shino shook his head. Negative. When I got closer to the village, there was a trail of bodies left and right. Many of them had their hearts taken out or were dismembered beyond recognition. My assumption that it was Akatsuki was far-fetched, of course, until I saw Fu far away from the battlefield and she mumbled with an implication that she be stowed away. I then took the decision to bring her here as quick as I possibly can, where there are more shinobi. As the interview continued, Sakura had subtly evaluated every statement that Shino had said, and when she was done, she noted Sasuke had already left. She got up as she bowed to Shino to let him get some rest as she went out of the room. Outside the door, Sasuke was waiting for her. Since when did you leave? Sakura asked, and Sasuke answered, since 10 minutes ago. I got what I needed and I simply left, not to waste any more time. So what's your verdict? Sasuke answered, he's telling the truth and it fits well with that girl Shino talked about. So he checks out. So, you think that Akatsuki is capable of challenging one of the 5 great powers too, huh? Sakura asked, and Sasuke nodded. S-rank criminals are dangerous for a reason. For others, they threaten stability. For most, they are ruthless criminals that are willing to commit atrocities for personal gain. If their goals indeed are the village's deterrence for war, then they themselves should be assumed that can challenge any of the 5 powers. Indeed, a scary thought. The two began to walk away, with Sasuke telling the 2 Anbu guards to start patrolling on the roof of the hospital and to the surrounding blocks. Sasuke's current assignment was in the village to act as the eyes of the Anbu commander. Still though, you think there is something going on between Shino and that girl Fu? They sound close enough that Shino knows her behavior quite well. Sasuke shrugged. I don't know, and I should probably not pay attention to it like you do. Sakura rolled her eyes. Sasuke, I'm not a rumor monger, I'm not Ino. Birds of a feather flock together, Sakura. I am not that bad when leaking personal stuff to the streets, you know. That's Ino's thing, not mine. And don't think I didn't notice you advising your fellow members to expand the radius of what they should be guarding. You let Shino free to visit Fu. I didn't know you can be a sneaky matchmaker. Sakura teased her teammate while Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this. I don't know what you're talking about. This is standard Anbu protocol. And you're one to talk when you said Fu's room number. Well, excuse me, Mr. Protocol, I'm sorry. You got me. It's totally not to let Fu have someone familiar in her current state, nope. Sakura replied, a smile on her face. She knew that Sasuke saw something in Fu similar to his situation. The least bit helpful thing to do was to let an unfamiliar face attend to her. She was currently in distraught. But the fact that Sasuke had read the situation tells more about his growth as a person. That was sweet of you, though. Sakura commented, a smile on her face as they made their way out of the hospital and back to the Hokage's tower for their meeting with Tsunade. The sun was already beginning to set and Sakura noted that Sasuke remained silent throughout their walk together. Along the way, they met with Kiba, who was reading the current bingo book in his hands, Choji, who currently has a piece of jerky in his hands, and Hinata, who was smiling at them. Sakura first took note of their appearance. With all their busy schedules, they had only seen each other very rarely these days. Kiba was wearing his ceremonial robes of pelt stitched together with white mane on his shoulders blended together with his black leather jacket. On the side of the pelt he wore was a torn sleeve that only had bandages wrapped on his upper arm, while his forearm had the character of blade tattooed on the upper third. His black pants remained the same, however, and his pet Orochimaru had grown much since Sakura saw her last time, now about the size of a young horse. His hair had grown wilder as well, and there was a certain air of focus coming off from him. Choji, on the other hand, had grown a bit more muscle-bound since the Chunin exams. Sakura had heard from Ino that Choji had been sent to train in a monastery near the capital, and the faded blue armor stitched to his red long-sleeved shirt seemed to accentuate the boy's physique more, with a little bit of fat still on his torso. But what truly changed for Choji was his now long and spiky mane of brown hair. Sakura had noted that the Akamichi proudly let their hair long due to their jutsu, and that hair would become sharp enough to shred things apart according to what she heard. Hinata, for her part, was wearing a white and light blue yukata with the Hyuga symbol placed on the back of the clothing along with a new one that Sakura didn't recognize. Her yukata was neatly tied by a purple obi at her back as well, and her hair had gotten longer again, now reaching to her upper back. She noted a scroll sitting snugly at her obi. She had recently arrived, and Sakura noted Hinata's elegance as she greeted them with a bow. Wow, Hinata, what's the occasion? Why are you wearing a yukata? You look good, Sakura asked, and the heiress smiled at her once more. Oh, these are ceremonial robes that my mother's clan wears after our pilgrimage. Hanabi-chan's caretaker had the Hyuga symbol stitched here as well. You're not stuttering as much anymore, too. I guess that trip you did definitely did help you out with your confidence. Sakura said with a smile on her face as Hinata giggled, shyly placing her sleeve to her face, and replied, I wonder about that. During my visit to my mother's clan, we met with Naruto-kun and Jiraiya-sama. He was with me there all the way. Hinata had instructed her 4 guardians to remain at the Hyuga mansion for them to know their new home. After arriving, Hinata was advised by her father to attend the assembly meeting with him tonight, and thus had no time to change since arriving home. Oh, you met with Naruto. Now that's a coincidence. How is he? He's doing fine, Sakura-san. From what I gather of what I saw, Naruto-kun is taking in Jiraiya-sama's teachings quite well. Jiraiya-sama has been praising Naruto-kun's learning ability in Fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu was an art most people did not seem to delve into. The mere mention of the word drives people away most of the time. It was as complicated as medical ninjutsu, to the point that it was on a more scholarly level than most branches of the shinobi arts. Sakura was quite impressed at her teammates' achievements. So Naruto isn't as stupid as he seems, huh? Hinata giggled. Naruto-kun is a very insightful person. It's why I like him. Speaking of missing people, Ino told me that she was heading to the tower first today, so she won't be with us, and Shikamaru is already there. We should totally get together after that assembly. What's with you, Sasuke? Why are you out in the open wearing your Anbu uniform? The hell is up with that? Shouldn't you be hiding or something? You can't fool me. I can smell your scent from a mile away. Kiba asked the Uchiha, prompting the two girls to cut their talk short as Sasuke looked at Kiba through the mask and said, I just got off duty, dog boy. Didn't have time to change. But I don't see what that has anything to do with you. Now, guys, stop antagonizing each other, we should reserve that energy for the assembly. Hey guys. The attention of the group turned towards a fair distance seeing Tenten, wearing a blue long sleeve and light armored chest plate over it covered with a black muffler with a pink accent on the inside and a pair of dark navy blue pants. Her hands were covered by a pair of white gloves mostly, but there were a lot of seal designs written on them. Behind her was Neji wearing a long sleeve gray shirt and a black waistcoat over the same gray pants. The sleeves were a bit bigger at the hem, giving the effect of billowing in the wind as he walked. Lee was seen with a black open cheongsam with the sleeves rolled up over the same chest plate as Tenten and a pair of iron bracers on his forearms over his bandages that covered his wrists, and the only thing green now with Guy's carbon copy was his pants, now with bandages tied just below the knees and the hem of his pants now tucked in his sandals for less drag when performing kicks compared to his leg warmers. His weights were still covered around his ankles and proudly displayed to the world. Tenten-san, they discharged you at the hospital? Sakura asked and Tenten nodded. Yes, if you can believe it. A little bit of painkillers is what Shizune-san gave me, and I was right as rain, and she required me to attend the assembly tonight. Neji was eyeing the one wearing the Anbu uniform and spoke. You've changed, Uchiha-san. Your shoulders don't look as stiff as much. Have they welcomed you in Anbu? Same as you look like you're less worried. Were Kakashi-sensei and I helpful with that jutsu you were thinking? Neji nodded. Indeed, the examples you used certainly helped me with that jutsu. I would like to test it sometime in a spar. Neji then turned to his cousin with a smile this time. Hinata-sama, you seem changed as well. Has your trip been fruitful? Very much so. Hinata replied with a nod and recounted her tale from Izumo and the coincidence of encountering Naruto there. Choji-san, don't you look most youthful since I last saw you? I see you've been training harder than anyone else these days. Lee smiled and gave Choji a thumbs up. The kind boy merely looked down a little embarrassed. Well, the monks did put me through hell. The group chatted with each other as they head towards the Hokage Tower for their assembly. Away at a rooftop, a boy looked down at the group and wrote something to his notebook. He watched them all intently, taking note their mannerisms and their familiarity with each other. Once they were at the tower, they were met with Shikamaru by the entrance and Ino by the hallway. Shikamaru was wearing his standard uniform while Ino was wearing the same, only now with a thin coat that resembled Morino Ibiki's. When they finally made it to the hall, each team gravitated towards their Junin sensei, and it was here that Sai had appeared with Kakashi's team as Tsunade was waiting patiently up front. Once everyone was settled, Tsunade crossed her arms, spoke, "Is everyone able here?" Tsunade took note of her assistant just behind her and her apprentice's peers as well. She nodded and spoke again. I called for an emergency assembly because there is an alarming movement that concerns the terrorist organization, Akatsuki. A few murmurs escaped and Tsunade continued. Recently, one of ours decided to break protocol concerning Tokigakure and entered their borders last night after two envoys of the Tokigakure side have not appeared. I'm sure those of you who have done border patrol on that place know how Taki is very strict with their timetable, and I'm glad that he had the intuition to see that there was a problem. Sakura and Sasuke remained silent. Tsunade was talking about Shino. According to what we had gathered with him and his rescue, Tokigakure was invaded and destroyed by what is suspected to be Akatsuki. The suspicions have merit seeing as there was no activity of a large military force seen anywhere near the country and no reports of military involvement was presented. Soon, murmurs started getting a little louder. From what they know, Akatsuki only had 9 members. It was damn near impossible that these 9, no matter how strong they were, had managed to fell a ninja village even if minor. With these, we now measure their capability to wage war against the ninja villages. And if this is any indication, then it means Akatsuki is confident enough to cause untold destruction within the continent. So with that in mind, I've decided to put plans into action. The western border between Taki and Hinokuni will be locked down. I've already instructed that part of the outpost to barricade the place as much as they can and seal off all entry points coming from that country. Tsunade then eyed 2 of her best Junin, Kakashi, Guy, you two will be sent to the western border to serve as backup for the border guards there. Whatever comes out of that border, you have my permission to use lethal force. As of now, we are recognizing Taki as a fallen country. Whatever ties we have with them now is no longer existing. We can assume that the power vacuum it creates and whatever rises from there will be under Akatsuki's affiliation. The outpost there will be moved to Kawano Kuni to secure that route to Suna. Any attempts of travel to Suna will be through that route for the foreseeable future. Quote. Tsunade then looked at Sakura's peers and continued, next, all recently promoted Chunin for the past year or so will be undergoing team drills under wartime conditions that will be supervised by Junin Yuhi Kurenai, Junin Nara Shikaku and Junin Akamichi Chuza. Junin instructors, you will be asked to give your input if you are available. Sarutobi Asuma. Tsunade had called and the man replied with a nod and an affirmation. Get in touch with Chiraku again, we'll see if we can restart the 12 Guardians. Once you've done that, you will move northwest. Kusagaker has mentioned before of strange border activity concerning AIM. I refuse to be blindsided if we are going to face Akatsuki, we can't trust what is occurring between there and up to Taki. Asuma nodded at this as Tsunade then let loose another wave of orders. We will be looking to expand more genin teams in the coming months. All active genin as of now will be evaluated by a governing body for promotion personally handpicked by me. We will need an active Chunin force to strengthen our numbers and to ease the brunt of the oncoming work from our Junin. Chunin teams will be sent to do more dangerous mission work. Missions that require beyond borders will only be handled by Junin if mission specifications are far too difficult for Chunin to handle. Most of the mission work will be done by our Chunin in order to maintain our revenue and keep this effort going. Everyone became tense. The Godime's words were implying that they were preparing for war. Veterans of the last war could already tell where this was going. Tsunade seemed to understand the general concern of the room and she continued, I understand your concern, so much that I get why it is happening. And it is true, we are preparing for a war and this war will involve an enemy the likes of which we have never faced before. Back then, it is between nations, we understood their motives and what their goals are. But our new enemy does not show their intentions. Their goal is to destabilize the world through amassing power and they have certainly showed us what they are capable of even if it is minuscule. I don't know how we will become victorious in these circumstances but we must prepare. All of us have to brace ourselves. With that, Shikaku stepped forward and began assigning shinobi to different teams left and right. He had decided to have a small group of platoon leaders made up of Junin and from there, they were given specific tasks on what their new roles shall be. These Junin leaders will then be required to report to an emergency war council headed by Hokage-sama herself. Recon and espionage teams will be the most important factor for this. Each will be headed by Hyuga Hiyashi for the reconnaissance team and Morino Ibiki for the espionage team. Jiraiya-sama has already informed us that his spy network will be given to Ibiki-san's team to corroborate any intelligence data that may be helpful in this endeavor as well as to discover any double agents within these groups. The Hyuga clan shall play the most roles in recon duties along with the Aburame and the Inuzuka. The Yamanaka will serve as our communications link across the country while most of the Akamichi will be assigned as our vanguard for the village. The Nara will be distributed among these groups and the Sarutobi will be assigned on different border posts on the hotspots. All your assignments shall be posted near the entrance at the tower. As soon as the assembly was finished, Naruto's peers all gathered around and Ino was the one to speak first. Talk about tense, huh? Sakura nodded. Tell me about it. I got nervous when Hokage-sama was talking about how we are essentially at war now. Neji gave a nod. Given the scare of what Akatsuki is capable of doing, I wouldn't put it past Hokage-sama to have us prepare for war. Otogaker failed at that attempt even with the help of a major power. A terrorist organization succeeding in what a military force couldn't is a dangerous implication. Shikamaru looked thoughtful for a moment. Those wartime drills are probably going to be troublesome. I'm guessing we will have different objectives in each drill with the focus on different aspects of our abilities and with the varying level of skill in our age group, some will play a more important role than others in different objectives. He could picture it in his head, different scenarios in different locations. Shikamaru sighed as they began to exit the hall. He then saw a new face within the group, a black-haired pale kid that was wearing all black except for the lower torso to show his abdomen. Shikamaru had a bead of sweat at the back of his head. Who wears something like that on a mission? You're a new face around here. Are you Naruto's substitute for Team 7? Sai looked at Shikamaru and gave an empty smile that seemed to creep Shikamaru out. Why, yes, indeed I am. I'm Sai. It is a pleasure to meet the budding successor of Nara Shikaku. I'm sure we can work well together compared to my current team with Ugly and Duck Face. I heard that, Sai. Just you wait there. I'm going to send you through the floor for that. Ino noticed this and a smile escaped her face as she approached Sai and Shikamaru. Oh, so you're the guy Sakura mentioned. Welcome to our little group. I'm Ino, and the big one in red is Choji. Sai silently stared at Ino for a few seconds, thinking of what his research about trying to be close to other people would say. He had a bad start of calling Sakura and Sasuke derogatory terms for endearment, but it seemed to have failed. So now, he was going to do the opposite. Ah, hello, Ms. Beautiful, it's nice to meet you. He said with a smile, causing Ino to be slightly taken aback by Sai trying to flirt with her. Aye, the pleasure's all mine. Sai, you sure have a way with words. Ino chuckled nervously. This was going to be harder than she thought. Sai then turned to Choji and said, it's nice to meet you as well. I would have never guessed that you were an Akamichi. You don't look as fat as the others. What did he just say? Said Kiba in a panic as he tried to constrain his much bigger friend and barely succeeding. Sai, I am so going to murder you for that. Sakura shouted in indignant rage. So now Sai was giving out compliments as nicknames while she gets stuck with Ugly. Somebody needs another hard lesson. Calm down. Chouji, I'm sure he meant that as a compliment. Shikamaru was now with Kiba in trying to stop Choji from smacking Sai like a bitch. I'm not fat. I'm big boned. Cue to Choji now being held back by Lee with Shikamaru and Kiba. Sage of Six Paths, Choji. What the hell have you been doing? Did you take some steroids or something? We can hardly hold you off. Kiba shouted as he pulled the boy by the shoulders while Akamaru was pulling by the hem of his shirt. You've grown strong, Choji-kun. Yosh. If ever we face off at our drills, I will gladly face off against your strength. Okay. People, break it up. We're going out to eat together and I would rather not have any kind of tension while I eat. So stop this stupidity and just let go already. Tenten went in to disperse the tension and calm down Choji as Shikamaru then began fishing for information. Being Naruto's substitute must bring a lot of pressure from his teammates, then if you can't approach them well enough. But I've never seen you around the village. Just where exactly are you from? Sai smiled again and replied, I'm from the village. My program is slightly different from yours. And yes, though I am a substitute, I don't think that would be the case. Ugly and Duck Face just do seem like the type to hold on with a useless fool that has to be trained by a Sannin just to be competent. Some of the people in the group began making scowls. Naruto may have had some bad traits, but it certainly didn't warrant for him to be put down while he was gone. Sai didn't seem to read the atmosphere within the group as he continued, I imagine that him almost dying against a traitor makes him a failure for a shinobi of Konoha, and in this world, there is no room for trash like him. Neji looked beside him as he saw Hinata, who wordlessly walked her way towards Sai and was smiling as well, but it seemed much more hollow than what they had come to expect of the shy Hyuga heiress. Sai-san. Hinata politely called for his attention and the boy turned around only to be smacked in the face with her palm so fast that most people didn't notice. Sai fell down hard on the floor, surprised that a meek and seemingly weak-looking Hinata had viciously slapped him across the face without even telegraphing her movements. She didn't even use her chakra at that time. Sasuke, for the first time since meeting his peers again, had activated his Sharingan as he sensed a terrible killing intent. He looked at the Hyuga heiress who had slapped his teammate's substitute down on the floor as Hinata's smile was changed to an expression of someone looking down on others. The look she displayed was the look of utter contempt, like how a noble would look down on a peasant. You don't get to speak like that against him. You don't even know him. And to look down on him means you insult most of us here too. It was because of him that we are where we are right now. It's true though, isn't it? Sai asked as Hinata raised a foot and let her killing intent show. She was going to stamp his face in on the floor until a hand was placed on her shoulder. Hinata looked to her side, seeing Sakura was the one who held her back. Hinata, stop. Her Byakugan was now activated. Sakura had noticed. She had never seen Hinata be this angry before. He doesn't know Naruto. He's only judging from what he hears around him. That's the problem. He doesn't know Naruto-kun enough to speak like some baseborn gossiper in the village. I would not sit back and watch as someone insults his honor like this. Hinata said, clearly enraged at what Sai had just said. Her shyness was definitely gone now, but in place was something Sakura wished didn't show up. Naruto, I'm sure you would be swooning over her for this, Sakura thought with a smile as she replied. I know. But we're a unit now, we can't have this kind of squabble among ranks. Not when we have so much on the line. Hinata calmed down and took a deep breath before she looked at Sai with those same eyes that seemed to look at him with disdain. Know your place, fool. To try and calm the situation down, it was Kiba who initiated to break the ice. Man, I'm hungry. Is that barbecue place still open tonight? All this talk about war is making my head spin. Let's just forget this for tonight and get going. Choji seemed to agree with that. That place will remain open when I go there. Dad knows the people working at that restaurant and he knows the owner too. We can stay there up until midnight if we want to. Alright. Nice one, Choji. Let's get there before all this tension splits us down in the middle. Everyone seemed to agree with that one. Konoha Hospital. Shino appeared before the specified room, Sakura told him. There were no guards in sight. Odd, Shino thought. It was either the Anbu were situated in someplace else within the hospital or they were hiding to not be noticed. Before entering, Shino came knocking on the door as a voice had said, "Come in." Shino did and saw Fu on the hospital bed, looking out of her window into the Konoha's open sky with the moon overlooking the village in bright lights. Fu, I heard from your friends, Shino. Thank you, you saved me. Shino remained quiet for a while and then replied, it's what friends do, Fu. I know, but Fu gripped her blanket tightly as she refused to let Shino look at her face. What about my village? What about home? Shibuki-sama. I'm sorry. Shino apologized. No matter how many apologies he would send to Fu, nothing could take away the fact that the only home she had ever known was destroyed and everyone in it dead. All because of her existence. I can't imagine how much this pains you, Fu. No matter how much I apologize that I was only able to save you, I had to act on what was best. I didn't know if there were any survivors. All I saw were dead shinobi and kunoichi on my way to find you. You have to understand on what I had to work with. Fu was silent for a few seconds and shook her head, I know. But still. For what it's worth, Fu, I can help you make friends here in my village, nobody knows whatever secret you're hiding. Once we're out, I'll introduce you to my team and. Shino. Fu had cut him off and Shino promptly stopped. Can I ask you a favor? Shino replied, anything for a friend. Then can you come closer for me? Fu asked as Shino complied. When he got close to the bed, Fu had embraced him tightly as she hid her face in his chest. Shino didn't move as Fu remained quiet. Shino noted the growing wetness in his shirt. He noted the Fu was crying. Just stay like this for a while, please. She pleaded as she sobbed. She had lost everything. Shino held her as she cried. No words can escape from him as Fu continued her silent sobs. The night was particularly cold at this time of hour within the village, and this warmth was what Fu desperately needed. This is what she needed for most of her life. Myobokuzen. It had been a week since they arrived in Myobokuzen. Naruto had been non-stop training in learning senjutsu arts during the day, and at night, he would improve in other areas that needed focusing. To better help his apprentice, Jiraiya had decided to join him in his training to let him emulate and see for himself the training results of using senjutsu. Fukasaku had guided them along the way, and to let Naruto feel the ambient nature energy around him, Fukasaku applied toad oil to him only once in order to record into memory of what nature energy was like. From what Naruto experienced, the flowing energies around him felt like the morning dew. It was everywhere and his skin could feel the energies gently caressing over his skin, but unlike the morning dew, which composed of mostly cold water, this felt like a warm breeze touching him everywhere in his body. Oddly, he felt so good when he detected it for the first time. As if a child was returning home after a long day at school, arriving home with a warm meal prepared so he could relax. It was like he was returning back to nature itself. Naruto turned to his board as he stepped aboard it and let the seals do their work. A low hum escaped from the wooden item and Naruto grinned. He let the wind take control and he was once again in flight. Now with better control of this jutsu, Naruto calmly rode to the night sky as he stared up. He still had to make a name for this jutsu, but that was the least of his worries now. He swiveled in the air, snaking around as he made a pattern on the clouds. The sky remained beautiful tonight as the moon illuminated the mountain. For a moment, he had not a care in the world. As Naruto slowly descended back to Earth, the blonde thought about other avenues he could do himself. He had visited Gamakichi and Gamatatsu, children of the chief toads, the other day, and they got to form a special bond immediately. Gamakichi being the more headstrong of the two and Gamatatsu being a happy-go-lucky if a bit dim-witted at times younger son. And both their elements showed with their characters as well. Gamakichi could use fire-related abilities while Gamatatsu could use water-based jutsu. On a related note, Naruto started training on his wind element again, this time, applying and compressing wind chakra at the tip of his fingers and releasing them at their highest point to let out a powerful blast of piercing wind that pierced through stone. Simple concepts applied for Naruto made it sure that he could do jutsu without the much-needed hand signs that took a lot of time for him. Naruto landed on the ground, grinning from ear to ear as he left and made his way to his rest house. Jiraiya and the toads had given it to him to serve as his private room while Jiraiya settled for the one he had once when he was younger. It was a fortunate thing that the place was still intact after all of these years. When Naruto went inside, he saw an object wrapped around in cloth. Shima had left him his dinner. During their first few days here, Jiraiya had forgotten about the fact that the daily diet of the toads consisted of bugs. Both of them suffered for the first day until Jiraiya had the bright idea of going grocery shopping at Fire Country to one of the many portals that he had set up as a shortcut to Myobokuzen. Shima at first looked disheartened that what she had in her kitchen didn't exactly contain food meant for human consumption, although edible for the average human. But both he and Jiraiya had not developed a stomach in eating what she cooked and so agreed to Jiraiya's way and had the two help Shima during cooking whenever they can. It turned out that the Shima's cooking was just only meant using bugs, but applied to human taste as well. The two always looked forward to her cooking ever since. As Naruto took a bite out of a freshly cooked tempura in his mouth, Naruto had unfurled the scroll that he didn't give away to Karen, Takamagahara, Plane of High Heaven. He unfurled it and only found another seal pattern that resembled a Jikuukan seal he was getting too familiar with. There was a common rule now that Naruto understood about Uzumaki Jikuukan seals. The seals were two-way seals in that the person who has entered the jutsu will be marked and must go out the same way they go in. It certainly helped in transportation, but on the battlefield, these seals were not much help and was detrimental unless there was another person operating the seal to where it was activated. Naruto bit his finger and applied his blood to the seal and a portal opens up in front of him. Peering at the portal, Naruto saw a great and empty white hall that had seals lining at the ceiling to emit light and then a hallway with the characters above it described as Takamagahara. Naruto, without his teacher, decided to enter inside. What he saw was something he could only dream of. Konoha. 1 week had passed. Shino had been cleared for active duty and during that time, he was briefed by Kurenai and his teammates about the Hokage's plan and was surprised that there would be a 3-day course per week of training for wartime drills. He had also introduced Fu to his teammates, earning her a warm welcome with them while Kiba was nudging suggestively at him. His teasing didn't seem to work, but Fu looked a little embarrassed at that. Shino had raised an eyebrow. He had noticed his peers changed, much to his curiosity as many of them were wearing things differently like Sasuke and Hinata for example. The last Uchiha was wearing his Chunin vest over a long-sleeve high-collar suit with white arm and hand guards and blue pants covered at the legs with the same kind of armor as his arms. Kiba had said that Sasuke would mostly wear the Anbu uniform, but apparently, not today. Hinata was now wearing a shortened purple kimono that reached all the way to the middle of her thighs with her legs covered by a pair of leggings that reached to her ankles with black knee pads as support. Her pouch bag was placed just to her back with her kimono bound by a purple obi. Ino wore her vest over a black tank top with gray shoulder pads and blue arm guards. She wore skirt armor over her pants and knee pads with her sword placed sideways just behind her lower back. Alright, maggots. Welcome to boot camp. Now I know you all have these team formations that you like so much, but for this training, we're ditching that and placing you all randomly by drawing lots. Anko shouted as she had a box to draw from and all 12 of them went and drew a piece of paper of either blue or red. All those who drew red go to my left side, all those who drew blue go to my right. The Chunin and 2 Junin sorted themselves out. On the red team was Uchiha Sasuke, Hyuga Hinata, Nara Shikamaru, Rock Lee and Tenten and Aburame Shino. On the blue team, Hyuga Neji, Haruno Sakura, Yamanaka Ino, Inazuka Kiba, Sai, and Akamichi Choji. Enko grinned. A mixture of different skill sets in different teams. It would be interesting how this will play out, and with two Chunin being evenly separated, there seemed to be parity for now. It won't always be that way, though. Good, now, we're heading to a newly renovated training ground in Training Ground 50. Today we'll be training in urban warfare. Shikamaru sighed. Out of all the scenarios, it had to be the most troublesome. Urban warfare was much more difficult than what they were used to. The logistics to factor in all the environmental hazards and the coordination required to obtain objectives were a nightmare to many planners of a city siege. Once they had arrived at the said training ground, Enko grinned again and began her scenario. Alright, blue team, wait way over there while I begin my scenario to the red team. Get over that side, chop chop. The blue team went away as the red team wait for Enko's instruction. Here's your scenario. You are the defenders of the city and your stronghold will be located about 3 kilometers here north by northwest. Within your custody will be the VIP. Your job is to prevent the blue team from obtaining her and taking her to the extraction point. Where that is, you'll have to figure it out. Establish the pecking order and who gets to be in command. You will have 10 minutes to familiarize yourself with the land layout. Combat is no holds barred. We will oversee your skirmishes so you can go all out to your heart's content. Move out. All 6 of them had jumped towards the training grounds and headed to their stronghold first. Enko nodded. These brats were trained well. She was happy that these kids were growing well enough without much problems. Konoha's new generation was blooming into fine flowers. Blue team. Get in here. Red team. Hinata was the one to lead them towards their stronghold. With her Byakugan, she had immediately blazed a trail followed by Sasuke, Shikamaru, Tenten, Shino and Rock Lee. Shikamaru. Sasuke called out and Shikamaru turned his head to Sasuke and the Uchiha spoke, I'm deferring command to you. You're the best strategist and tactician we have. Shikamaru nodded with a small grin on his face, way to give me the pressure, Sasuke. I second Sasuke's decision, Shino said as they made landfall towards their base. Lee and Tenten nodded as well along with Hinata. Shikamaru sighed and looked at their stronghold. Shino was surprised when he saw Fu at their base. Hey guys. She waved at them and continued, Enko-sensei asked me to act as the VIP and I couldn't exactly say no. Enko must have bribed her. I just discovered Dango and she just gave me 3 whole servings. Yep. She was bribed. Shikamaru then noticed something plastered on the destroyed wall and the Nara grinned. It was a map of the area. He had recognized earlier the land they were treading on and finally recognized their position in the map. Alright, first, Enko-sensei gave us 10 minutes to study the land, not much time to memorize it, but enough time to prepare. The fastest of us, Sasuke and Lee will sweep the area and plant traps outside, the messier, the better. That way, even if they do manage to see them, they'll let their guard down and the next layer of traps will get at least one of them which will be planted by Tenten and Hinata as they get closer to the base. Shino, I want you to spread your hive as far as you can. I want full coordination on where the traps are in place so that we can avoid getting caught in them. For skirmishes, buddy up. Team fights in an urban setting are difficult, there are a lot of obstructions in the area that will impede our vision except if you're a Hyuga. Hinata, you'll take the highest point here and communicate via Shino's insects. You'll be our eyes and tell me where the positions of our assault team. Sasuke, Lee, intercept and disrupt their team formations as much as possible. Tenten, provide long-range support. If you can, go with Hinata and start sniping people. Shino and I will hold the line. Our objective is to not let our VIP get captured. My guess is that there will be a time limit placed on the blue team, so if we can't contain them, then we're going to stall. As the red team began discussing their plans, the blue team was being briefed by Enko and their part of the scenario. Alright blue team, by this time, you'd probably know your role here, right? All of them seemed to nod. They were going to be the assault team. Right, for formalities, Sake, I'm going to tell you again, you guys will be the assault team in this scenario. There is a VIP you need to extract from the enemy's stronghold, where that is, figure it out. The red team presumably knows the layout of the land and you are about to enter enemy territory. You'll be put on a disadvantage here. The extraction point is by the southeast and you'll be entering the training grounds by the south point. Due to time constraints, you are only given 2 hours to complete the objective. Actually, your objectives are optional: neutralize your enemy, or rescue the VIP. Either way, if you manage to do one of the two, your mission is a success. But keep in mind the time limit, or if your team gets knocked out, then your mission is a failure. Like I said with the red team, establish the pecking order and have a command structure. That way, when commencing the assault, you'll be better organized. You'll be entering the area in 15 minutes, be sure to be ready by then. Oh, and go ham on them. You'll be expecting a lot of resistance. As they made their way to the southern part of the training grounds entrance, the blue team began discussing their chain of command. So who's going to take command of this team? We can talk about that later. Right now we need to discuss about how we're going to do this. We don't know much about urban warfare to know how our approach is going to be. It was then that Sai raised his hand. Urban warfare is usually mostly combat in enclosed spaces. Alleyways, streets, inside buildings and the like. Those who have a bird's eye view of the vicinity usually have the advantage. I suggest I do aerial recon and tell you of our enemy position. Neji looked at Sai for a moment and then back to the team, contemplating this, but was shut down by Kiba. You do realize that they have Tenten out there. Any form of aerial threat will be shot down. Plus, Sasuke can cover the air as well. Sakura added. Neji nodded at this, duly noted. I'm assuming none of us here have any support to give to Sai in the air, so our best chance is to stick to the ground. However, if we are going to the extraction point, I would suggest to use Sai as he has the fastest way to get there by air. Neji then continued, finding the enemy stronghold is easy enough, but the question is what should the approach be? Ino was the one who answered that question: multi-pronged assault. Neji raised an eyebrow at this as Ino grinned at them. With Shikamaru being my teammate, you learn a thing or two. The fastest and his most preferred way of dealing things with the enemy is to never having to touch them. He sets up elaborate traps here and there to whittle them down and have us deal whatever gets close. He's definitely going to be the team leader for the red team. With the way this training is set up, they'll have a huge advantage, but he has to have a linchpin, something that will make it difficult for us for his backup. That will be Shino or Hinata. Kiba answered. Shino's bugs are used not just for tracking, but they can be used to communicate in code that only Shino knows. He's definitely the one who's going to be coordinating Shikamaru's orders. Hinata will be the one to do surveillance. Most likely have Tenten as long-range support. Neji nodded to this as well. I know full well how Tenten and I operate and I agree. If anything, she will be with Hinata-sama, who will act as her spotter. Then Sasuke and Lee will act as Shikamaru's muscle. Choji answered. Now a plan was formulating with the blue team. The ones we will look out for the most, then. Sakura nodded. How many ways to attack their stronghold? Kiba asked as he petted Akamaru on the head. Neji answered them. 3. We will need to attack them on 3 different points. Traps will be numerous, but Lee and Sasuke cannot be at the same place twice, and one area will be left vulnerable because they will possibly defend by partnering. And with Hinata-sama and Tenten in a probable stationary place, one area will definitely be left open to us. I volunteer to attack head-on. It's a nice way to serve as a distraction to boot. Choji raised his hand. The brunt of the defense will be focused on Choji, I'll be his support to replenish him. Sakura continued. Neji was relieved that they had a medic on their team while the red team didn't. Then that leaves me to go with Sai, right? Ino suggested, but Neji shook his head. No, they would be commencing the extraction itself. With Kiba's nose, they can avoid the traps. We need you to communicate some suggestions on what to do next in order to get inside Shikamaru's head. You're a censor, and most likely, I'll be facing Sasuke. Do we have our communicators with us? Ino gave them 6 communicators to wear as they were running out of time. Well, that settles it. I guess Neji is going to be our leader, huh? Ino said this as they all agreed. We'll be entering in 2 minutes. Don't disperse unless I say so. I'll be searching for the stronghold. Once I find it, do your rolls. We will adjust our strategy as we continue. Kiba bit his thumb and let it bleed as he smeared it on the tattoo of his left arm. Migi Buso. Yeba, left arm armament. Blade. A plume of smoke erupted from said arm as Kiba held the knife Musei Setsuden Ki, silent cutting machine, with his right hand. Hiba then twirled the knife at the ring as he mounted on Akamaru. Shikamaru may be the best strategist they had in their group, but his team still had numbers. Once they had entered the training grounds, Neji was quick to act and activated his Byakugan. A few minutes later, he had already found the enemy stronghold. North by northwest, 3 kilometers from here. Hiba, Sai, go north. Choji, Sakura, begin your assault. Ino, with me. All 5 of them nodded and went to their task. With Shikamaru and Shino's insects stirred as they told him that the blue team has entered the area. Shino warned Shikamaru and the red team's commander nodded. Begin the operation. Shino then communicated to his insects to warn his teammates. Up on the highest vantage point of the training ground, Tenten and Hinata were alerted and Hinata was quick to activate her Byakugan. The tower she and Tenten had selected was slightly near the northern side. It provided Hinata with the appropriate range and allowed for Tenten to cover her teammates with long-range support. Unfortunately, the consequences of this was that the northern side would be left vulnerable if someone managed to approach that area and begin their way eastward after reaching the northern gate. I have Sai-san within my sights, going on to your 1 o'clock, Tenten-san. Tenten nodded and had summoned Shinkyu. She decided to use blunted but weighted arrowheads to not cause too much damage. She drew back Shinkyu, God's bow. The 2 chakra strings came to life as Tenten drew her weighted arrow with Hinata pointing to the direction where her aim was supposed to be. Tenten grinned and let her arrow fly straight and true. The weighted arrow zipped through the air and made its mark. Hiba, Akamaru and Sai were sprinting towards the northern gate in order to make a hard turn until something had suddenly exploded from behind him. Hiba looked back and saw Sai barely dodging a long and seemingly weighted round arrowhead. Holy shit, they found out already. Hiba was panicking but did not immediately let go of Musei Setsuden Ki. Sai got up immediately and had resorted to another option. Instead of running in the streets, Sai went inside one of the hollow buildings and began jumping his way window to window. Hiba grinned. Sai was a smart bastard, alright. Hiba, knowing that he wasn't the target, decided to maintain his stealth with Akamaru and made his way north. It was smooth sailing yet. With Sakura and Choji, the both of them were once again paired up, and this time, they were going for a full frontal assault. Choji, remember the last time we paired up? Choji grinned. Do I ever? Let's steamroll this thing. Sasuke or no Sasuke, Sakura was determined to win this thing if only as bragging rights. Choji had enlarged himself and began rolling straight ahead, destroying buildings and traps along the way as Sakura followed suit. She was immediately stopped when a ball-head arrow almost knocked her on the face. The arrow smashes on the ground, leaving a crater the size of a small table by about half a meter in diameter. Sakura looked up at the direction to where the arrow came from and noted that it was pretty far away for her to do anything. She looked back at Choji, who was continuing to roll his way forward. Sakura was left alone. Oh no, I got separated. She had no choice. Rather than to catching up with Choji, she was going to find the sniper. Up onto the vantage point, Tenten clicked her tongue as Hinata told him she missed twice. I guess I need to get used to using these things. The adjustment is pretty whacked. I'm sorry, Tenten-san. I'm not used to being a spotter for you. I can see how difficult it is without a good spotter like Neji-ni-san. Hinata apologized, knowing that Tenten's aim was always spot on, but her calculations for the distance and the angle were not as good as Neji's. Ah, don't sweat it, Hinata, you're new to this kind of teamwork. Neji and I had to practice this since we were genin. Hinata nodded and felt relieved that her first time using her Byakugan this way was not as accurate as she wanted to be. Her Byakugan still activated, she noted Sakura was separated from Choji, a good sign. And then she began to take into account who were in the training field. She saw Neji, Ino, Choji, Sakura and Sai. Wait, where's Kiba? Hinata frantically searched with her Byakugan and found Kiba almost at the edge of the northern side and about to make a turn to the left and head towards the stronghold. How did she not see him? Tenten-san. Kiba is at the far north. He's about to make a left turn towards the stronghold. Tenten, quick to act, grabbed one of the ball arrowheads and aimed to Hinata's direction. Tenten hoped and prayed that Hinata's calculations and her aim were better now. Tenten then let go of the arrow as it flew through the sky headed north. To the south and going west, Neji and Ino were walking in a much more sedate pace than the rest. They were careful of not setting off Shikamaru's traps, and so far, they seemed to work. Not only was Ino detecting the traps, but with some pebbles they had picked up, they began immediately disarming them. Neji had no such trouble with the help of his Byakugan, but as they went further along their route, they discovered that the traps were getting harder and harder to detect. A good 30 minutes later, they had committed their first mistake. A portion of a building's wall detonated thanks to her, but that in turn triggered another trap from below as the debris touched the ground, and another set of explosives blew up in front of them and almost taking them out. The place had turned into a minefield. Shikamaru, I swear you can be such a pain. Ino thought of this as she ran for cover, only to be met with another trap that was triggered when she had accidentally stepped on a tripwire, causing the remaining walls to close in on them. Neji was quick and immediately blew back the wall with a well-placed air palm on both sides. I expected nothing else from the genius of the Hyuga clan. Ino shivered. That voice, no. Up on the roof of another building was Sasuke, sitting there with sword in hand. Ino, I want you to rendezvous with Choji. Sakura has been separated from him. Apart from her, you're our next best healer. Go. Enten. Bakuseka, blaze release. Exploding star flower, Sasuke then sprouted orange fire from his hands that sharpened and turned into a shape of an 8-pointed star. He then let it loose at Ino's way. Neji noticed immediately the amount of chakra poured into the technique, and once Sasuke let the shuriken fly, Neji had blasted at it with an air palm, causing an explosion in between them, surprising Sasuke to say the least. He knew how much damage that was going to cause. Sasuke noted as he sees Neji converting his chakra into lightning and applying them to his tenketsu. Ino, go now. Ino nodded as she leapt away. Arches of lightning then surrounded Neji like an orb as Sasuke tossed another flaming shuriken at his way, only for Neji to react incredibly fast and with 2 fingers already in mid-thrust as he appeared close to Sasuke. Shippu Jinrei, Hurricane Swift Thunder, Neji was already on the Uchiha, who was almost hit if not for his own reflexes and with his sword. He's gotten faster with that thing. Sasuke thought as he jumped away to one of the safer areas and then held up a single hand sign. The sound of a chain of explosions was heard as the building Sasuke and now Neji was standing on began to collapse in on itself. Neji was quick to react. He flipped back and landed to more familiar ground where there were no traps. Sasuke could feel the excitement escape him. It had been a while since he fought someone of Neji's caliber. The two of them stood against each other. Who was going to prevail? The prodigy of the Hyuga clan? Or the last of the Uchiha? Both of them dashed at each other, each intent on winning this battle. Up to the north, Kiba's world went spinning as he was smacked on the face by Tenten's arrow, falling off of Akamaru and landing on the floor with a thud. Up to the vantage point, Hinata and Tenten sighed in relief a little as Hinata announced a direct hit. They couldn't celebrate yet as Hinata noticed that Sai was heading their way along with Sakura. Oh, we're getting boxed in. Not unless we abandon this place. Let's report this to Shikamaru. Hinata nodded and laid out their reports before abandoning their vantage point, leaving behind the ball head arrows as they jumped away. Hinata had made the prudent decision to go at the midway point on the north in between Kiba and the base. But stopped when she saw Shikamaru move. An idea forms to her head. Hinata decided to look for their extraction point to block away the team's exit point. Tenten, however, decided to confront Sakura head-on. When Sai had reached the vantage point, no one was in sight to defend the place. He had earlier tracked the way the arrow had flown, judging from the angle of the arrow that had almost hit him earlier when the highest point of the training field was in sight. Sai had to weave his way from building to building and bid his time. When he saw an arrow flying northbound at said point, Sai's suspicions were confirmed and immediately put his plans into action. Unfortunately, when he arrived, there was no one in sight but only a bundle of ball arrowheads that were abandoned. Deciding to scout out his enemies, Sai saw the Akamichi making halfway point towards the target and immediately drew an ink bird, disregarding the risk of the long-range support, as they may have decided to forego that strategy now that the tower became indefensible. Sai rode the ink bird and went straight to the center to support his teammate. At the center, Choji continued to smash his way through and blazed a trail of destruction in his wake. By the halfway point, the traps that had been set up in the middle were now destroyed. He continued to roll forward until something stopped him. Something had stopped him in his tracks. Choji turned back to normal as he saw Lee putting a stop to him with his legs firmly set apart to lower his center of gravity and right palm open with his right arm outstretched out front. Choji was surprised at this as Lee then took a deep breath and let go a furious uppercut that sent Choji staggering back when he evaded. The force of the blow alone was enough to rattle his bones as Lee went back to his stance before shifting to another and inhaled once more before saying, "Kongosho, Diamond Way." Lee's body began to bulk up, matching Choji's physique. Choji noticed the hard rippling muscles by the taijutsu practitioner. "Come, Choji-kun, let us see who has trained better." Choji wordlessly adjusted himself and grabbed the staff on his back as he faced off against Lee. The two ran at each other as Lee went for a punch. Choji angled his staff and parried the blow as Lee evaded a kick from Choji. Lee ducked out of the way and, faster than Choji, he let loose a vicious haymaker on the Akamichi's face. Choji was quick enough to respond and moved his head sideways as another tried to knock him out. Choji was quick to jump back as Lee was about to do another attack. Choji noted how strong Lee was. "Choji!" Ino shouted just as Lee was about to charge at him. Lee stopped when Ino had drawn her sword and pointed it at Lee, and Sai had just arrived as he landed with his ink bird. Lee was thinking about retreating when his backup had arrived. It was Shikamaru. "Care for one more?" Shikamaru said as Lee gave Shikamaru a thumbs up. 2-on-3 was a disadvantage to them, but as long as the VIP was with Shino, they were safe. Ino was puzzled. This didn't make sense. If Shikamaru was here, then what about the target? Who was protecting their objective? Time, 1 hour and 30 minutes left. Myobokuzan. I know what Takamagahara is now. Jiraiya looked up to his student and wondered what it was that he blurted out all of a sudden. Naruto looked at his sensei back and said, "Follow me, I'll show you." "Why not just tell me?" Naruto replied, "Because it's better if I show you, Ero Sennin. You'll be amazed." Naruto and Jiraiya then arrived at his rest house. The scroll for Takamagahara was laid out on the floor and a space-time portal showed him what Naruto saw earlier. Once they crossed the portal, the Toad Sage marveled at the colossal structure they were in as Naruto grinned at him. "Okay brat, where are we?" "We're in Uzushio." Naruto replied as Naruto walked towards the door with the label of Takamagahara. Jiraiya followed the boy and at the end of the hall and saw a bridge, looking familiar to that of a ship. The window outside showed off the calmer side of the Eastern Sea. "Takamagahara isn't a jutsu, Ero Sennin." Naruto then stretched out his arms and said with a wide grin, "The full name of this thing is Kachu Yosai Takamagahara, Flying Fortress Plane of High Heaven." Jiraiya's jaw had hit the floor. Rippling 29. Inheritors Part 3 Book 2 End. Kachu Yosei Takamagahara, Flying Fortress Plane of High Heaven. Jiraiya repeated Naruto's words, trying to make sense of what his apprentice's words. Still finding it in himself just to what the hell Naruto meant with its name. He hoped to high heaven that the name was not named after something of what it really is. "Yeah, did I stutter?" Naruto asked. Genuinely. Was what he said truly couldn't be grasped when the name meant what it literally meant? No, absolutely not. Jiraiya replied hurriedly. The man looked around, seemingly impressed with the bridge. The Toad Sage began to hum as he looked around once more and Naruto excitedly pointed to another door. "You should totally check out the areas here. I'll show you," Naruto said excitedly with a grin as Jiraiya followed his apprentice and began to take in Naruto's impromptu tour of this thing. He and Jiraiya began exploring and the man whistled. This place was huge. Almost the size of at least 5 city blocks. This probably meant that this place would have been manned by at least 50 people. But then, a question came to Jiraiya's mind. What would such a huge structure serve for the Uzumaki? Being so hidden away that the only entry point to this place was via a scroll that was also hidden away. "You wouldn't believe this place, Ero Sennin, this thing has everything." "No doubt," Jiraiya replied as he looked around. There was a large open space within this place with what he could tell was a wall that would fold outwards and act as a gate, or a ramp. Then another hallway and this time, with a flight of stairs leading upwards. Naruto wordlessly went ahead as Jiraiya followed suit until they reached to a hallway with multiple doors in them. Jiraiya peeked to one of the doors and noted them to be living quarters and with bunk beds to boot. There were approximately 2 pairs of these things per room that would number into the 20s in total if not more judging from the sheer size of the place. Further into hallway, There was a split into two differing pathways, from what Jiraiya could tell by the signage posted on the wall. To their left was the mess hall, to the right was a room called the Sun Dome. Thinking that the Sun Dome was the more interesting of the two, Naruto turned to the right with Jiraiya once more following his apprentice and made it into the sun-designated place with another signage posting on the wall indicating they have reached the place and another hallway reaching to a place that Jiraiya could read as a med bay. This place was turning more and more into something that Jiraiya didn't want to think about. When they made it into the Sun Dome, Jiraiya noted that this temperature in the room increased what with the thick almost a meter thick tempered glass that was probably so sturdy that it seemed unbreakable. And this material surrounded the room outward from the roof to the walls. Seals were lined up from wall to wall on to the support beams that these tempered glass were put on. From what he could discern, the seals placed on this thing were fortification seals that further increased the sturdiness of the place. Jiraiya looked up and saw sunlight above. With only focusing on such a small hull that expanded towards them, he noted that this place was on a cove of some sort within Uzushio. The fact that no one seemed to have discovered this place for decades meant that this was as much of a secret as their secret weapon was. Jiraiya then looked around. Countless flora he was not familiar with were planted on ground that seemed to be partitioned perfectly. This was most likely the greenhouse. It was so pristine, if a bit warmer than most of the area. Jiraiya wasn't sure how they were able to do it, but they also probably had a working irrigation system within this room alone if the plants here were kept alive for years. Naruto then motioned for Jiraiya to follow him to the med bay, and when they arrived, the whole thing looked like a large hospital wing with enough equipment meant for patients in the ICU if a bit dated. But if this were at least 4 decades ago, the whole thing would have been state of the art and would have beaten Konoha's burgeoning medical services by a wide margin. As they continued their way, Jiraiya was coming closer and closer to his conclusion, and it chilled him to the core. As they went in further and further, passing the large med bay, they were now entering into the storage room, which was even bigger than the hangar bay and the med bay. Jiraiya watched as they entered the storage area and saw a stockpile of weapons, kunai, swords, shuriken, supplemental items like smoke bombs, and even large iron spheres the size of which were about as big as a home appliance that were laden with paper bombs. These things looked heavy if the dented floor was anything to go by. This was a fortress all right. In another storage room were logistic supplies. Bandages, medicine and rations, many of them had preservative seals on them, something that had stumped Jiraiya. There were no seals that functioned this way to his knowledge. The Uzumaki certainly denied the world of their knowledge with their destruction. Jiraiya sighed. It was such a waste, and even the great clan of the Uzumaki fell to the paranoia of distrust as much as the other hidden villages. Imagine how they could have blazed a trail for the future if they weren't killed off. The tragedy of war was that its first victim was the truth. But after that, the tragedy of war was absolute destruction. Jiraiya sighs again as they left the storage rooms. Naruto then motioned for Jiraiya to follow him again, and they went for another way. The blonde then pointed to the sign. Training room. This place was turning more and more into a small city than it was some base. Or a fortress. So what's the flying part? As if answering his question, there was another way that Naruto pointed, and they went in. The sign said by the top of the door was the engine room. I went to see the engine room. It looks like whatever it is there also serves to power this place, or at least that's what I think. The problem is that from what I can tell, there's no energy source to it. Jiraiya hummed for a moment and let his mind run. An engine meant there was something that converted power into motion. Moving gears, spinning rims and all that. Jiraiya looked around the engine room and noted to be the unit itself to be massive enough at the center with 4 cylinders laid horizontally behind it. More pipes that anyone has seen in their entire life intertwining and connected to almost every direction of the room, no doubt serving also to power up the entire place. Now, Jiraiya was convinced. This really was a mobile fortress. A mobile fortress that can move in the air, apparently. Naruto mentioned that the place has no power source, only that the seals present here were placed and activated by the ones who made it and maintained with their chakra ever since. That was the thing about Fuinjutsu. To keep a seal running, the chakra it has been given doesn't end up getting consumed, it only remains there to keep things running. So where is this power source? Naruto shrugged. It's just behind the engine. Or supposed to be. I don't know. Probably because whoever built this thing didn't think about how much energy this was going to consume for it to be running. That was an understatement. This place would require power from something like a Biju. Kid, out of all the shit we did out of this entire trip, this has to be something that we should never speak out. And I mean it, Asura. Minamoto no Banbutsu, gathering of all creation, and now this. Kid, this trip has been a clusterfuck for all the wrong reasons. If I didn't know better, I'd say we just triggered a doomsday event in the future. Jiraiya said to his apprentice and scratched his head, how does this happen? How? Ah, damn it, I knew you were going to say that. This thing is practically a good secret base, if we can get it running too. Jiraiya asked the blonde, with what? Naruto began thinking and hummed. I'll think of something. Jiraiya had put a stop to this immediately, and blow us up along with this sweet piece of property from your ancestors. No more experiments, kid. For now, we're going to do things my way. And my way will be a multi-step process of having an entire team looking up at whatever it is you cook up in that head of yours. But you just told me not to talk about something like this. Jiraiya nodded, and silent we will be about this topic. But that's not to say we can get some eggheads back home to look up how we run this thing up to scale. Who knows, maybe if we finish it, we'll be honoring the sacrifice of your ancestors by completing this thing. Now, how the hell did you know this thing can fly? Naruto grinned and replied, oh that's easy, let's get back to the bridge and I'll tell you. Hey, Ero Sennin, we should totally let Ba-chan in with this. Naruto grinned and Jiraiya was skeptical at best. Why not just kill me here, then? I think we've done enough damage that will give me another damn scar from her. Naruto did not know this, really. What was the first? I peeked on her. Jiraiya said this as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Naruto's respect for the man lowered. Naruto looked at his godfather with pity and disappointment. What's with that look? Don't tell me you didn't think of doing that to your significant other once. A vision of Hinata in only a bath towel entered his mind and Naruto's face lit up like a lantern. Jiraiya had to laugh at his apprentice's face at that. Got it into your head, huh? It's only natural that I want to see my girlfriend that way. Naruto defended himself and unexpectedly, his godfather nodded sagely at this. That indeed. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Naruto. My future star pupil. Jiraiya laughed with a lecherous grin on his face as he could only imagine his apprentice's future encounters with the fairer sex. With his new book so close to publication and roll out, he was sure he was going to roll on the Rio when it sells. Nothing keeps a good erotica novel writer down. Training Ground 50. Ino was anxious. She noted at the time. 1 hour and 30 minutes left. The chaos of what was their training exercise for this occasion had made its way known and smacked them right in the face. Plans went up in smoke. What was supposed to be Kiba and Sai's role devolved into support. Kiba was nowhere to be seen and probably knocked out. Neji and Sasuke were squaring off in an area filled with landmines that Ino's teammate had oh so generously used against them. Their premier medic was nowhere to be seen too, probably figuring out what the hell she was supposed to do, and what turned into a distraction ended up as the main force to get to their objective. Of course, Ino had to take notice of the fact that Shikamaru took a page out of Naruto's handbook of crazy as hell plans that didn't make sense until you got into the receiving end of it. So, this is how it goes, huh? You against Choji and me. Of course, you do know that we know how you play this, right? Ino mentioned as she looked to her right. Choji remained silent as he held his staff. Shikamaru grinned and said, please, Ino, you and Choji aren't the only ones who's changed. Shikamaru then twirled two kunai with both his hands. Doden isn't the only thing I've been learning about, anyway. And you never told us. That's low, Shikamaru. Shikamaru simply snorted at this and laughed. That's rich coming from an intelligence agent. So are we doing this or not? Are you acting out of spite? Come on, at best it was a prank. I don't think you have room to talk there, Ino. Not you too, Choji. Is this what you call as unresolved sexual tension? Ino and Shikamaru looked sick at the thought and shouted at Sai, hell no. Okay. Just for that, you're going down, Sai. Shikamaru threatened. Shikamaru then tossed the boy a small round pellet. Sai reacted on instinct and cleaved the object in two with his short sword before a large cloud of smoke popped open. Shikamaru grinned and let his shadow do the work as he ordered Lee, strike hard and fast. Your target isn't Choji, go for Sai. Lee nodded wordlessly and with Kongosho still active rushed into the smoke where Sai currently was. Sai had no idea what was going to come up next as he was suddenly met with the force of a bull with Lee slamming onto him with flying kick. Sai was tossed out of the smoke and was sent crashing to one of the ruined houses. Sai retaliated by deploying 10 ink lions from his scroll and launched them all at Lee. Lee, for his part, kicked the ground and left a crater to his feet as he jumped. He smashed an uppercut to one of Sai's ink lions as it was immediately dispelled with a splash of ink. Lee then stomped one more as he landed and inhaled as he charged at the rest. Genryuken, illusion dragon fist, Lee seemingly disappeared from view as he smashed one ink lion to another in puddle of ink. Sai was quick to replenish his creations as for every destroyed ink lion, had replaced it just as quickly. Lee was not going to stop though. Lee exhaled this time, letting out the air from his lungs earlier and went into a stance, his hands outstretched to his sides and performing a circular motion. As if in a trance, Lee had suddenly began firing his fists in lightning-fast strokes. Kongosho. Senju Kanon, Diamond Way. Thousand-handed Guanyin Bodhisattva. Wata-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Waka. The rapid-fire fisticuffs came raining down on all against his way as the ink lions splattered all around him, none were left. Meanwhile, Ino and Choji were still in the smokescreen that Shikamaru had tossed at them. Ino had the mid to prepare as she commanded to Choji, jump. The muscle-bound Akamichi obeyed and he did so, clearing himself from the smoke screen as Ino stabbed her sword on the ground and began performing a set of hand seals before being taken over by Shikamaru's shadow. It was then that Choji began to form unfamiliar hand signs and aimed at Shikamaru. He ended his set of hand seals with the seal of the tiger. Sorry about this, Shikamaru. Kaden. Enden, fire release. Fireball. Choji let loose a stream of flame towards Shikamaru who had no time to dodge as Choji's flames obscured Shikamaru's form whose shadow was centimeters away from Ino. Megan. Hyaka Ryaran, demonic illusion. 100 flowers blooming in profusion. Lee was about to advance at Sai when he noticed a violet flower petal swaying at the corner of his vision. 1 turned to 3 and then suddenly there was countless flower petals dancing in the air spinning around him. Lee's focus became affected. His eyes became half-lidded and his vision became blurry. He was trapped in a genjutsu. He had one way to refrain himself from succumbing. He had to stop the use of Kongosho immediately. Deactivating his technique, he could feel the connection of the genjutsu waning and contained all of his manageable chakra within. Lee then resorted to his Gakken Taijutsu and came face to face with Sai who had already closed the gap between him with his ink creations. He was suddenly sent spinning as Sai managed to land a punch at him. Lee shook his head to maintain his focus. Genjutsu truly did debilitate any and all shinobi. Lee was then held down by Sai's ink lions and was pinned on the ground. It looks like I win, Mr. Eyebrows. Sai said with a smile and Lee seemed to take it in good-naturedly. It is a good attempt, Sai-kun. But know that I still have a trick up my sleeve. Lee then with all his unnatural strength, smashed one of the lions that was holding his left arm into the other and spun crazily like a top as he fended off the other 2 who had let go of his leg and went by their creator's side. Lee then landed on the ground with a small piece of candy in his hand. Guy had given him a choco bonbon and told him that under no circumstances should he eat it and only do it if he ran out of options. Lee didn't know why his sensei forbade him to eat candy so vehemently, but he trusted his sensei's words. Since he was forced to use Goken and being trapped in a genjutsu wasn't an option being way too vulnerable for it, Lee decided that it was all or nothing. Lee popped the piece of candy into his mouth and immediately, he blacked out. Sai was left stumped when Lee had decided to eat the candy and promptly passed out. He was thinking that Lee had more to show than just taijutsu, but it seemed this was all Lee was known for. If this failure had managed to enter their forces with taijutsu alone, then it spoke volumes to how talented the boy was despite being handicapped. As Sai was about to leave, he stopped when he felt something behind him. He dodged just in time to see Lee gliding through the air like a missile before the boy landed on the ground and rolled on it before he got up. His gait was sloppy. Where'd ya go ya? Metro lookin' bastard. Slurred speech. Was Lee intoxicated? Sai had to ask that question when the said taijutsu practitioner turned to him with half-lidded eyes and a face as red as if he was slapped on repeatedly. Ah, there ya are. IWUZ wondering when ya were going to fight me, ya coward. Lee then went into a stance. It was loose and sloppy, Sai noted. It seemed like he was inebriated. Lee then laughed out loud. Ahahahaha. What? Too chicken to face me? Then if ya ain't goin', I will. Lee then dashed at Sai, who was on guard, but Lee tripped midway and skidded on the rock-hard ground before just stopping in front of Danzo's agent. Sai was about to make himself scarce and observe everyone to have a grasp of their skills when Lee had somehow rolled from his mishap and stood on his hands to deliver a reverse axe kick at Sai, who was slammed on the floor before Lee somehow adjusted his momentum in midair and landed perfectly on his feet. Sukin user. This class is quite troubling. Sai thought as Lee pointed at Sai and laughed. Ahahaha, got ya. There, ya damn creep. It was then and there that another presence made itself known as a fireball was sent at Lee's way. The inebriated brawler lazily and sloppily dodged to his side and landed on a handstand and looking around as if he was finding out who did it. It's a good thing I woke up after 3 minutes thanks to Orochimaru, because what happened back there was embarrassing. The voice had said, and Kiba came into view, Musai Setsuden key in hand before dispelling it. He had relied too much on the blade's ability to keep him from being discovered. The jutsu that was planted into blade was useful, but now he had discovered the weakness of the weapon. Kiba was sure to keep in mind this lesson in the future. He can't have others figuring out what the blade can do, or the jutsu would not take effect as much anymore. Wuz zat you ya bastard. Lee hollered out loud to Kiba, who looked at Lee curiously. Lee, what are you? Less talkin', more brawlin'. Lee then leapt at Kiba. At the same time with Choji and Ino, Choji panicked a little as he had engulfed Shikamaru in flames. The smokescreen thinned out and vanished as Shikamaru's shadow receded back. Ino gave a sigh of relief as she almost came close to being captured. She noted another arrival of one of her allies as Kiba, who had been stationary at the north for at least 10 minutes. Why he changed direction was beyond her, so she asked out loud, Kiba, what are you doing? Why didn't you stick to the plan? Because the target wasn't at the base. No one was there. Kiba shouted as he dodged Lee's attempt to attack. Orochimaru was about to counter when Lee jumped through a broken window and rolled on the second floor before looking confused. What? When the flames cleared, Shikamaru remained standing there, unarmed. A wall of shadow protected him from Choji's flames. Kageki no Jutsu, Shadow Wall Technique. Well, you got me. The original plan was to turtle down at the base, but with how spread thin we were, we decided to do things a bit differently. Shikamaru said this as the wall of shadow came coming down and back to his own shade. Shikamaru had his hands in his pockets. You asshole. You used my familiarity against me. That's my shtick. Ino was fuming. She had never thought of Shikamaru to suddenly come up with a backup plan after knowing how they were spread thin in their line of defense. When they had successfully separated Sakura and Choji in the middle, she was forced to make the effort to push at the front line and support Choji to leave Neji to face Sasuke. Shikamaru knew full well that they were going to do an attack on 3 different angles and that 2 would remain hidden as they got close. Tenten and Hinata's job was to find that angle and disrupt it. The 2 had met their objectives twice. But the push in the middle was what they had the most in advancing. With Neji being hampered down against Sasuke and the infiltration group effectively halted, the middle was all that was left to barge into. And already seeing that no one could stop Choji once he literally got the ball rolling, Shikamaru came up with another solution. You had Shino run with the target. Ino answered when she figured it out. Ino was obviously pissed. Shikamaru had been playing them for the entire time. It was why having a strategist in any team was so vital. Sai. Kiba. New plan. Search and retrieve. Find the target and take them to the evac zone. Take to the skies. Sai. I can't sense Shino or the target. Something is jamming my sensory abilities. The 2 nodded and leapt away as Sai had produced a large ink bird and ascended to the skies. Kiba had run away just in time before Lee could notice him. Hey, where'd the doggy go? Lee asked, still in a drunken state. Choji, fend off Lee, I'll handle Shikamaru. Clang. 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 2 girls clashed with swords just a few kilometers away from Shikamaru and Ino's group. One was holding 2 double-edged swords while the other was holding a naginata. In a battle of weapons, those with the longest reach to win most of the time. Sakura and Tenten had been fighting for a few minutes now. One couldn't take advantage over the other. Surely Tenten had the advantage in range. Her naginata was longer and didn't need to reach in to deal damage, but Sakura could initiate by having different avenues for attack. Tenten was impressed with this supposed style that Sakura was using. It was quick and versatile. One sword could be used for offense, the other to parry and create openings. As long as one is aware of their position, their angle and their range, then this one was a style truly meant for maiming and killing. Tenten had encountered different styles only around the village, but this was the first time she had seen this peculiar style. Are you self-taught? Sakura answered. I guess you could say that. Tenten wasn't convinced. Don't be coy, I know all of the schools of thought existing in this village concerning armed combat, even the ones Anbu use. I've never seen that style before. So it's either you had a teacher from a foreign land or you were self-taught. Only someone like Lee who has dedicated his life in taijutsu can come up with their own style. You don't seem like the type, being a medic and all. Sakura answered. Well, the style does actually exist, it's just that I only understood the concept and from there, work my way around with the help of Kakashi-sensei. Tenten seemed to nod at this. I see, no wonder you have such a vicious and a dangerous training method, and has it ever occurred to you? It looks like Gai-sensei and Kakashi-sensei's rivalry extends to his students. Tenten twirled the naginata with both hands and grinned, but I don't intend to lose this one, either. Sakura had a grin of her own. Oh, this is on. The two then dashed at each other and swung their weapons as they play a dangerous game. Tenten brought down the naginata, Akasazume Autumn Sand Rain, down hard to Sakura as she dodged to her right and advanced quick enough before Tenten could come up with a defense. Sakura lunged, thrusting one of her swords forward, but was immediately blocked by Tenten's retractable glaive, Tsukishiro acting as her shield. Sakura noted that Tenten's greatest asset wasn't her knowledge about weaponry, but her versatility. Tenten deflected the blade upwards, causing Sakura to lose balance for a second, and Tenten let go of the shield and tossed it at her. Sakura leaned back and noted that the shield suddenly turned into a throwing glaive, with the outer pieces of the shield suddenly expanded and three blades made itself known as it went past her and on to the walls. The shield ricocheted to a wall, then to another and another as it returned back to Tenten, who made the shield vanish and was now holding a huge single-edged blade whose blade was about his arm thick. Sakura noted a pommel by the curved blade's hilt. Gorenjigoku Pureplasm, the sword of the living flames. Tenten swung the weapon to Sakura, who made a X pattern above her head with her swords and blocked it. A stream of fire escaped from the blade as Tenten grinned. It's been a while since I had a challenge like this. Too bad you'll lose. Sakura grinned as well. Don't be too sure about that. It was then that Sakura looked the blade in Tenten's hand by having the blades narrow to Tenten's sword and had it moved sideways. Sakura then proceeded to kick Tenten by the stomach as Tenten returned Gorenjigoku to its storage and the weapon mistress herself staggered back. Sakura then sheathed one of the swords to her back and began performing a set of hand seals before ending at Ohatsuji. Genjutsu. Rokubuso no Shisai, illusory technique. Six-armed priest. Tenten suddenly saw Sakura then waving her hands around her, and two arms suddenly multiplied, forming six arms holding her blades in three different forms. The upper arms held their swords diagonally upwards, the middle arms were holding the swords sideways away from Sakura, and then the lower arms holding the swords in her hands in an X formation once again. Yaban na ukami no sakebi. Mie sumibukai seishitsu, cry of the savage wolf, threefold sinful nature. Tenten immediately summoned Suiginto in her hands and met Sakura's slashes, and Tenten could have sworn that Sakura's attack just tripled as she felt an increase in the strength in her attacks. She knew it was simply genjutsu, yet there seems to have no connection with her chakra. How was that possible? This genjutsu was inspired by the Bunshin no Jutsu, only instead of creating something intangible separate from me, I made this technique as part of me. That would explain why there was no sound when she tried to swing her swords. But if that's the case, Tenten then sent a wave of water at Sakura, who dodged but not before seeing one of the arms being disrupted and forming back together. I knew it. The aim of the technique isn't to increase the power of her strikes, it's to leave opponents open to where she will really attack. That's quite a technique. Mu no Kugyo, six-fold penance. Sakura then let go six chakra crescent strikes that made its way towards Tenten. Konoha's self-proclaimed weapon mistress summoned Tsukishiro back into her arms once more and crouched as she braced for impact. Six concussive blasts were endured, and Tenten thought, the hell? She sends six of these things as if four of these were actually real. Tenten then sprinted to the side and threw Tsukishiro straight at Sakura. The shield turned into a glaive once more as Sakura jumped to her side to avoid being hit, and the glaive bounced around again before returning back to Tenten. Kokuzo Bosatsu. Jutetsu Dan, Boundless Space Treasury, 10 iron bullets. Tenten then summoned 5 kunai and shuriken and had them launched directly at Sakura, who deflected the first 2 coming at her way and rolled to the side as she sheathed her swords and smashed the ground with her fists. Aokasho, Cherry Blossom Impact. The ground cracked and fissured and the earth trembled, uprooting the earth and stone from beneath Sakura to act as a personal barrier around her. Tenten was impressed. She was like seeing a miniature Tsunade in Sakura. When she had heard of Tsunade making it known throughout the village of having an apprentice, she was ultimately jealous at first as to who that person was. To be apprenticed by the person Kunoichi look up to everywhere was a dream come true for many of those aspiring to reach the level and even beyond Tsunade. But with her skill set, it was just not meant to be. Tenten aspired to reach the heights of her idol, not someone she could emulate. Given that Tsunade was a medic nin first and foremost, something she had no interest in, she would rather just aim as high as she could in order to reach that level of ability. She would have preferred to have the legendary strength that also made Tsunade known far and wide, but she took what she was given. Tenten had to mind the time in the clock, only 30 minutes left. To the southern part of the training grounds, Neji and Sasuke were exchanging blows as they began to enter into high-speed combat. Neji, who had by now switched for Denko Sekka, speed of lightning, had managed to outrun all of the traps that befall him while Sasuke chased after him and occasionally clashing as they did so. Kanmuru was a technique of high velocity and the Shunshin was a technique of extreme agility. While Neji was leaving behind a streak of lightning, Sasuke was only showing after images, meaning that he moved much faster than what was perceived by the naked eye. Neji and Sasuke clashed once more, arcs of lightning shooting up everywhere as the two of them faced each other. The fact that you can keep up with Kanmuru is a feat in of itself, Sasuke. Sasuke grinned. Same to you, not many can boast about being able to match Shisui's Shunshin no Jutsu to the point that it is almost comparable to the Hiraishin. Sasuke was having the time of his life. This fight was showing more and more promise as it continued. As Neji had switched once more from Denko Sekka to Shippu Jinrei, Sasuke countered and surged lightning around him as well, effectively repelling each other as they were blown back by their techniques. He had never expected Chidori Nagashi to have that effect on Neji's Raiden technique. Pitiful. Sasuke stopped for a moment as a voice enters his head, it seemed all too familiar as well. You have amassed great power, but you're not using it. You should have taken care of this earlier. Sasuke shook his head to maintain his focus, all the while back talking to this voice in his head. I don't need the Mangekyo Sharingan in this fight, I don't need the Cursed Seal as well. I'll use those abilities against my brother, but for now, I'm fighting with the skills I learned through years of training. What is power if it won't be used? Power that is meant for something else. Sasuke then performed a series of hand seals and ended with the Tora seal. Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu, Fire Release. Grand Fireball Technique, a large orb of fire was sent towards Neji's way as Neji performed a Kaden. Sasuke wasn't done and gripped his mother's sword at his back as he flickered out of Neji's view with an arch of fire descending on Neji from above and another from behind him and then another to where Sasuke stood earlier. Uchiha Ryu. Higasa no Mai Uchiha style. Dance of the Sun Halo, flames surrounded Neji from all sides as his Kaden continued to spin. A torrent of a flaming tornado happened as Neji was suddenly surrounded by flames all around him. Not wanting to be starved off of breathing air, Neji stopped the Kaden and aimed 4 powerful air palms above him. Hake. Shidenkusho 8 trigrams. 4 sky palms. 4 powerful compressed air shells aimed at the sky as Sasuke watched his flames slowly dissipate into the atmosphere. His vision returned to Neji, who was already dashing towards him without Kanmuru. Sasuke obliged and created 2 8-pointed stars from his fires and threw them at Neji, who evaded just in time with the stars curving in a different direction before they exploded. Sasuke wondered which was better, the ability to predict the movement of his enemies, or the ability to detect intent by the flow of their chakras. Either way, he knew that he and Neji were at par currently against each other. It was why they were Chunin. Up in the skies, Sai was scouting to where their target was. Danzo had trained him for years to make use of his jutsu to its logical conclusion. It was for this reason that Sai had a good view of what his jutsu was capable of. He was reminded also to never use it near someone who has seen it. Root had an unfortunate complication of leaving their targets dead. If one of them escaped, it means that someone would be able to trace their assault back to Danzo, and they couldn't have that. It was why Naruto was such a high priority target for them. Not only did they attempt to capture him, they failed to brainwash him and he had seen-size jutsu. There was no mistake now, they had to cut their losses and make sure that their work remained in secret. The problem was the commotion of what Naruto's death might entail. The Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi was not only in good favor of the Hokage, he was also in good favor of 2 of the 3 Sannin. The boy was untouchable in politics and in the shinobi arts. Danzo was wary of these 2 shinobi for the fact that they were of legendary status respected by both civilian and shinobi alike. That secured him on the spot as a target that would have to be approached in a different way or else, Root's tangled web of structures would be snapped at the seams. So it was why if there was nothing left for him to observe, Sai would slink back into the shadows of the organization and never reveal himself until the very end. As he looked down on the whole training area, he could see the multiple fights that were happening around, but then, he saw it. He saw 2 figures running away from the battlefield. He sees the target and prepares to swoop down and take the target to the extraction point. Sai then noticed another figure approaching the target. From what he could tell, it was the Kaki Inuzuka that was knocked out earlier and the one who came to help him. He was going to fulfill his mission. The ink bird prepared for a diving run and descended below as it nearly went into subsonic flight. Down below, with Shino and Fu, the 2 were running away from the battlefield as much as possible. Though Shino wanted to participate, they all had roles to fulfill. His job was to make sure none of the blue team members get their hands on Fu. Fu was enjoying her time as the target for once. She was intrigued as the Konoha shinobi participated in their plans to fulfill their roles. Everyone seemed to defer to Shino's friend, Shikamaru, as the leader and helped coordinate their plans successfully without unneeded interruption or friction. She was happy as Shino and Shikamaru talked with her as if she was normal. It was thanks to Shino that she suddenly felt like she belonged in this wonderful group. Oi, 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 Shino. Holding hands and being lovey-dovey during a training session isn't part of the simulation, you jackass. Let go of Fu this instant, said the person in indignation. Shino watched as Kiba jumped over in the air and landed on the roof of one of the destroyed buildings and pointed at Shino, looking mighty pissed at that. Fool around someplace else. This is why people tend to ignore you. Hey Kiba. Fu waved at him with a smile on her face as Kiba waved back. Yo, Fu. Hey wait. You're the VIP. Kiba was surprised at the fact that Fu had willingly participated in the event. Yep. Enko-sensei offered me the role and I accepted. Shino remained quiet. He had used the Mushi Jamingu no Jutsu, insect jamming technique, to remain hidden under sensors as they weaved away into town. He thought of hiding to one of the intact houses nearby until time had run out. It was just unfortunate that their tracks couldn't be hidden by scent. Shino. Quit holding hands, damn it. Kiba shouted indignantly again as he pointed to his teammate. No way Shino going to have a girlfriend before he does. No freaking way. Unfortunate for him though, it wasn't Shino who objected, it was Fu. No way, Kiba. I like holding Shino's hand. And she said it with such an innocent smile that it looked like Kiba was trembling in jealousy. Alright, that's it. This party is over. Akamaru, secure the target. Shino. You're dead to me. Inazuku Ryu Taijutsu Ugi. Suga Inazuka style Taijutsu finisher. Piercing Fang. Shino raised an eyebrow at this as Akamaru had suddenly vanished from Kiba as the said boy launched at Shino and began spinning like a drill in midair. Shino replied, why are you acting so illogical, Kiba? Before being shredded to bits by Kiba's technique. It wasn't Fu who reacted panicky, though, it was Kiba. Aw shit. I forgot about how much of a pain you were to deal with on a regular basis. Get off me. The image of Shino dissolved into a mass of insects as Kiba rolled on the ground to get those that had managed to cling to him to drop him. Fu on the other hand was laughing at Kiba's antics as Akamaru was on his back with his belly being rubbed by Fu. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Yes you are. Yes you are. Fu was cuddling with Kiba's dog as Shino reappeared just in front of Fu and said, let's go, Fu. Fu seemed reluctant at this. Do we have to? Akamaru looked like he wanted to play. We'll do that later. Right now we. It was then that a large pair of wings had managed to swoop in and grabbed Fu by the shoulders. Shino could only watch as Fu was immediately taken away into the air and headed straight southeast. Shino was about to give chase when Kiba blocked him off. Nope. Nah, not seeing your girlfriend until this whole thing is over. Kiba denied him and Shino seemed somewhat peeved at Kiba's behavior at this. Fu is not my girlfriend. You want to tell that to someone who actually believes your lies, you bastard. Kiba shouted as he went through a series of hand seals and ended it with the Tora seal. Oh, you are so going down, Shino. Kaden. Hausenka no Jutsu, fire release. Mystical fire flower technique. Small and quick gouts of flame escaped from Kiba's mouth as he began blasting Shino with his jutsu. Shino acted accordingly as ducked and weave at the flames. Shino then adjusted his glasses and said to his teammate, "It looks like I have no choice but to comply, Kiba." Very well. Shino's insects started swarming outside as if they were acting like his chakra. There was then a crackle beneath Shino's feet, but Kiba didn't notice it until more started arching around him. I will not hesitate to hold back. Time. 10 minutes left. As Sai held on to the former Taki Shinobi, he had immediately raced to the extraction point as instructed by Anko. He made a beeline there as fast as he can before anyone could take notice. However, it would not be as an air shell had managed to rip through his ink bird and destroyed it completely. Fu was able to land safely when a giant white tiger had made its way to catch Fu from the skies while Sai corrected himself and landed on the ground. The tiger then went to its summoner and Sai noted that it was Hinata. Good work, Byako-sama. Think nothing of it, Hinata-sama. I exist to do your bidding. Sai watched as Hinata went into her stance as Byako had Fu secured far and away from her. Sai slowly went for his sword. The fact that this girl had managed to find the extraction point was not to be trifled with. He could still remember the sting of the girl's slap on his face. The way she looked down on her just as much as Sasuke and Naruto did. You're pretty ruthless, aren't you? Hinata didn't reply. She wasn't going to give Sai that satisfaction of riling her up. Instead she had called upon Byako. The said white tiger landed behind her in a second as Hinata commanded, "Let us sink together, Byako-sama." It shall be done. Shiteno. Nishi no Shiratsu. Byako, 4 guardian gods. Alignment to the west. White tiger. Winds picked up and they began to howl in fury as Byako roared and his form glowed before Hinata began to absorb him. Drops of chakra flames began to surround her as her nails became sharp claws. 2 flames of chakra sprouted from her head by the sides of her skull and a long tail of white chakra appeared from behind her. Hinata had switched stances now as she leaned a bit forward and her hands were not as straight as that of a Jukin but looked like they were holding something. You will not get past me at this point. Hinata declared as she focused on Sai. The power she was emitting was coming off in wave after powerful wave. Hinata then charged. It was instantaneous. In less than a second, she had closed the gap between Sai and her and managed to land a claw strike to Sai's abdomen. It was by sheer reflex that Sai had managed to evade by narrowly dodging to the right, but Hinata had left a mark even if it was shallow. Senkosho, war cry palm. Hinata shouted and with her outstretched hand that had delivered the first blow, let out a powerful concussive blast in the shape of a tiger's head as Sai was violently sent through a wall and the one behind it before landing on the opposite side. Indeed, this group showed a lot of promise. He had underestimated their abilities. Each one he had observed had shown jutsu way too different from the norm. From the artisan's daughter, up to the noblest of clan members. They all exceeded his expectations. He got up and staggered a little. He noted that the Hyuga heiress was not one to take lightly. In fact, all of them were. Time's up. Maggots. All skirmishes are now to be on hold. Sai stopped for a moment and looked around. Apparently the whole place was rigged with cameras and speakers to boot. Behind a set of screens were Anko, Kurenai, Chuza and Shikaku. All of them were assessing the trainees together and each of them had a few things to say. So, what do you think? Anko asked with a grin and the 3 of them were looking each other before they gave their assessments. Better leader. An obvious choice, it's Shikamaru. Chuza remarked and Shikaku agreed. He's been training in delegating forces for the job. He's got an eye for ability and talent. The fact that the girls on Shikamaru's team were capable enough to hold off and actively stop the infiltration team is a testament to his decision-making ability. Chuza commented as Shikaku nodded at this. Kurenai looked thoughtful at this. Judgment does tend to be a good factor in deciding their competence as well. Chuza agreed with this and said to Shikaku, which is why Sasuke, Shikamaru and Hinata are on your top of the list then. Shikaku nodded. Kurenai seemed to swell in pride for her student. They have made very good logical choices. Sasuke for deferring command to Shikamaru, Shikamaru for coming up with a backup plan after knowing that they were spread thin to defend, and then Hinata for her foresight of actively searching for the evac point and ambushing Sai. But they were at an advantage, were they not? Kurenai asked, playing devil's advocate, and Shikaku nodded. That may be true, but advantage or no, the ability to recognize your shortcomings prior to engagement makes you an indispensable part of the planning phase. You'll be able to predict the outcome better if you knew the holes in your plans. Shikamaru knew that. Hinata knew that with the remaining time, the blue team would have to resort to extract the target to the designated point, as they were all locked into a stalemate one way or another. And Sasuke knew that because he had foreseen that he would be locked in combat with Neji. What about Tenten, Lee and Shino? Anko asked, and they nodded as well. Kurenai gave her assessment. Tenten adjusted enough that she could finally take down opponents with a Hyuga much different from Neji. She's a good support to have for long range, and she kept Sakura from coming back to the center or looking for any injured on her side. I doubt that was intended, though. Sakura's main goal was to find the sniper once she was separated. Chuza then added, in regards to Lee, he's performed well under pressure. Choji never expected Lee to withstand him that much and manages to keep Sai from helping Choji and Ino. Shino had been vital and followed orders to the letter. He's a good teammate to have in situations such as this because he can get things done quicker when he's asked to. He also helped Shikamaru to come up with plans. Kurenai made that input and the other two nodded. Shikaku remarked and then asked the other two, a good observation. What about the other team? Kurenai answered, Neji is obviously their best asset. He has taijutsu skill, a good tactician, and came up with a solution once presented with what his team knows. He considers their input and comes up with a logical and sound strategy. He can see holes within the enemy's plan and accurately predicted that a three-pronged attack would work. Unfortunately, they leave no room for improvisation. Once Kiba was knocked out, Sakura was separated from the center and Sasuke locking with Neji in combat. Ino was forced to be the one to aid Choji, and the others, immediately seeing Choji making strides in his advance, decided to push that line. It was ill-advised that they use the distraction become the tip of the spear. But they did it anyway, which gave Shikamaru an opportunity to have his backup plan. Shikaku then asked, best members of the blue team. It was Chuza who gave the assessment, Neji, Sakura and Choji. Like we said, Neji is a talented kid, he's a Chunin for a reason, the same as Sasuke is. Sakura, as the primary objective of a medic is to not be taken out, she prioritized her role as the premier medic and kept herself safe as much as possible, but once separated from Choji, instead of continuing on and ignoring the sniper's attacks, Sakura made the best choice to take down the sniper and then get back to assault the base, seeing as Tenten would not stop unless she ran out of ammo. Choji, because it's obvious, isn't it? He made the most progress out of the group and was past the midpoint by the time Shikamaru had backed up Lee. It's impossible to get him to stop once he was fired up. His only mistake was not checking if Sakura was still with him or not. But I'm sure it'll pass. Kurenai mentioned. Kakashi was going to have field day with this. Once it was announced that the red team won, Anko then continued that the teams would be swapping places and that the blue team was now defending the city while the red team would be the one performing the assault. However, they only managed to do this part of the training on the next day, seeing as everyone was exhausted with this training exercise. The next day, when the training exercise did happen, the blue team surprised everybody by winning against the red team on the defensive end. It was the fact that not only did they have the advantage of the terrain, they lasted longer due to Sakura and Ino healing the team and providing enough support for the others to repel their invaders. Instead of proactively whittling down the enemy force, the blue team decided to turtle and hunker down to keep the red team busy and obstruct their way to Fu. To Naruto's peers, it talked about the huge advantage of a defensive team during a siege that had enough supplies to last them for months. Of course, when it came for their Chunin instructors to give their insights, Kakashi was the one who started celebrating as his students managed to reach the top twice. Bragging rights were aplenty that day, and Kakashi gloated his students like they were the second coming of the legendary Sannin. If only Naruto would be part of that, and he was going to make Guy dress in an apron and recite the whole Ika Ika book at Town Square like he did 4 months ago. When it was time for a team briefing, the instructors allowed their students to meet with their Chunin leaders, and they met somewhere they could have plenty of talk to have. To Kakashi, it was always near the monument meant for those who died in service. Sakura and Sasuke usually met him there. Sai was there for the first time. During the months of intensive wartime drills, Sai was acquainted quite well with this group. They were diverse and inconsistent to Konoha's military doctrine by personality, but when it came to actually doing shinobi work, they were competent. Competent enough that they could even smack him around. During his stay, he had come to know the many facets of the group. And it seemed even with their emotions intact, they still were competent shinobi, by far. I just wanted to say that you guys made me proud out there, damn proud. Kakashi said this and smiled beneath his mask. You've all grown so much that I think by the time Naruto comes back, you're all going to be even better. Speaking of which, he's due to return home in a few weeks. How many years has it been? 3 years. He continued as he turned to the newest member. Once Naruto comes home, where will you be, Sai? Sai merely gave a smile. That seems to be up in the air. I think I'll be joining another team. Sakura sighed at this. Ino won't like that. She now has a buddy that would like to tear my hair out just because. Oh, I didn't know you were a masochist, Sakura. The 3 men in the group were looking at Sakura wordlessly, with Kakashi sliding a small step back. I swear, Sai, if ever there comes a time when you read the situation better. Sasuke shrugged a little and said, whatever. Whatever. Duckface and ugly. Sai. Kakashi laughed and he looked at Sasuke and Sakura, comparing them 3 years ago to now. They grew up and became better people. Circumstances couldn't have been better, and they became motivated when Naruto was promoted. A vision of his 3 students came to mind, the past bringing back not memories of sadness and death, but now of hope and redemption. You should hurry back, Naruto, see for yourself how much your teammates had improved and gone through. Myobokuzen. A year has passed and Naruto and Jiraiya were about to set off. In that year, Naruto had learned the hardships of training in senjutsu. He was clobbered too many times to count and fell off a cliff with the same amount. He had thought he was going to die with the same amount too. But he was glad that he was over that hurdle and could enter Sage mode now. He had finished his Sage training, however incomplete as it was, but that was going to improve over time. But the problem now was that he could only maintain Sage mode once because the Kyuubi couldn't allow some filthy toads to mix with his chakra. Naruto thought that Kurama was being a dick on purpose. Asura seemed to think so as well. With that out of the way, Naruto could focus on perfecting Sage mode. He still couldn't use it in battle, but the fact that it was enough for now certainly hadn't put a damper to his spirits. Especially when he just started to learn about his dad's famous technique, Hiraishin no Jutsu. Got everything you need? Jiraiya asked and Naruto nodded. Naruto grinned. Yeah, so which portal is the way to Konoha again? Naruto asked his sensei, who pointed to the one on the far left. Naruto-chan. I know there were a lot of difficult roadblocks you had to go through, but and I think you've been our best student yet. At least as good as Jiraiya-chan was. Fukasaku yelled at Naruto as he waved goodbye to his student. Naruto gave the 2 toads a salute and said, thanks, Ma and Pa. Being compared as a good student like Ero Sennin here is a real honor. Jiraiya swelled with pride at this. Just make sure to keep that whippersnapper out of trouble. And find him a wife that could at least bring some discipline in him. He's practically a middle-aged teenager. Ma then added. Jiraiya dropped his head in shame. Ma, Pa, I am a responsible adult. I'm the one with the important job here. Both Ma and Pa looked at each other and Ma shouted back, ya, get to be an adult when ya, stop with vices. Naruto-chan is less than half your age and he doesn't have stupid ass hobbies. Language. Ma. Fukusaku reprimanded his wife while Shima turned back to her husband and shouted at him as well. I talk about what I want, ya. Old coot. Who's an old coot? Ya old coot. I was raising tadpoles when you went out and had parties. Ya got that mixed up, ya senile fart. I'm senile. Now. Really. Let's just go. Kid, the more we stay here the more we'll get caught with their arguments. Jiraiya sighed in exasperation. He had to deal with this when he was younger. He's certainly still dealing with this now. Naruto had nodded and went to the pool that Jiraiya was pointing at and shouted, filled with enthusiasm in his voice. All right, back to the village it is. Next stop, Konoha and Ichiraku ramen. He hadn't had Ichiraku for 3 years, and 3 years is a long drought of ramen for one Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto made the leap first and Jiraiya soon followed. There was no place like home, as they say. Konoha. Outside the village, two men exited a small pond with a toad statue about the height of a normal human's knee. The first, a blond boy with whisker marks on his face, with hair growing out wildly as his blue eyes looked on in wonder to the familiar red walls of his village. He wore a green-red long haori with short sleeves reaching to his knees, with black flame designs at the hem and at the edge of his sleeves. Underneath his red haori was a flak vest that covered his orange long-sleeve shirt that was all black at the sleeves. His pants were all black reaching just above the ankles with his sandals in the same color. His forearms were covered by a dark blue pair of arm and hand guards and his neck was covered by his supposed forehead protector now with a black cloth and tied neatly behind his neck as a pair of goggles now rested on his forehead. At his lower back and placed horizontally was a wakizashi, a small sword with a red saya, and tied at the hand guard was a purple rope meticulously tied in different knots and a single fuda dangling at its base. Tied behind his back was a wooden board about as long as his leg and thigh and just about a little thicker with countless seals written with his back large backpack covering it. And soon, the other man emerged with long and unruly white hair tied to a ponytail and wearing a red haori over his green kimono. 3 years, Ero Sennin. We were gone for 3 years. Time flies when you've got a lot to do and a lot to see. Naruto said with a grin, he couldn't wait to see everybody now. Jiraiya seemed like he was relieved that it was finally over. 3 long years, this training, after all that shit we just went through, all of the things we discovered, Sage of 6 Paths, am I glad this is all over. Naruto seemed to agree with the perverted sage at that. They made their way to the entrance by the southern gate. Azumo and Katetsu, who happened to be the guards at that time, had looked over to the two gentlemen walking towards the gate as they greeted both Jiraiya and Naruto. Finally back, Naruto-san. Naruto made a fist and grinned at them both, you bet. The two Chunin noted the height of their query and were surprised that the boy that they once knew as the runt of the group was now at least as tall as Sasuke now. Looks like puberty was mighty kind to you, Naruto-san. Here to see the Hokage. Jiraiya was the one who answered, yep, looks like it's going to be quite a discussion when we enter. As they entered the village itself, Naruto couldn't help but notice the monument just beyond the horizon. Tsunade's face was added just after the face of the Yondaime. Naruto whistled and said, took them a while. Jiraiya nodded at this, with what she has to deal with having her face carved on that mountain should be the least of her worries. Naruto agreed to that. It seemed like forever since he saw Tsunade and his peers. Naruto, is that you? A voice had interrupted his reminiscing when he caught sight of his teammate. Sakura. You've grown. I haven't seen you since forever. Naruto grinned in seeing one of his friends. Sakura had grown much from what he could tell. She was tall, but not as tall as him. She was wearing her civilian clothes for now being off duty and noticed the one behind her was a black and red clad shinobi with that duck butt hairstyle of his. Sasuke. How are you? Wait, what are you two doing? Sakura looked beside her and pointed to Sasuke. Oh, we were just heading out to eat. Kakashi-sensei just dismissed us from a meeting and we're thinking of eating out before we go home. We happen to think of some ramen before we go. Naruto looked at the two jealously and streams of water was leaking out from his eyes. Damn, I wish I could go with you guys but I've got a report to make to the Hokage before I could have a bite. This sucks. Stupid. Priorities first, remember. Also, I'm now higher ranking than you, eat it, Dobi. Sasuke answered with a that smug of his and Naruto looked like he was grinding his teeth at it. 3 years, bastard. I was gone for 3 years. Don't worry, by the time I walk through those doors, the Hokage is going to give me my promotion, just you wait. Sasuke gave a small chuckle at this, as if that's going to happen. I'm going to watch you cry when the Hokage rejects your delusions then. Oh, Naruto, you just arrived. Glad to see you in one piece. Kakashi said this as the man jumped from the roof and landed in front of the blonde. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto grinned at the man and his Chunin instructor smiled back. Aren't you the chipper one? I'm happy to see that you still are a bit happy-go-lucky. Naruto then remembered something and set down his bag as he grabbed a book from it and handed it over to Kakashi. I've got you a present, sensei. It's the newest book made by Ero Sennin. Kakashi looked down and his single visible eye widened in surprise. Angels appeared from the heavens and its holy light shone upon the grace of the golden throne, as the gods have gifted upon Kakashi, its most holy treasure. It was a copy of the new Ika Tactics. Kakashi's hand trembled as he reached for the book, shaking in absolute astonishment as he held it for the first time. This is. His voice quivered. Yeah, I had to read the manuscript from Ero Sennin. I don't know what's the big deal with this book anyways, I found it boring. Naruto, did I ever mention that you are my favorite student? Kakashi said this as he read a sample of the incredibly austere writing and cried in absolute tears of joy. Jiraiya, however, found Naruto's comments about his books insulting. Ha! As if a brat like you could appreciate such fine art. A man of culture knows when to look for good material. Those magazines can never compare to my books. Never. In the middle of Jiraiya's rant, Tsunade had appeared just behind the man with a glare that could turn even the most hardened shinobi to stone. Quote. Yeah. Naruto and Jiraiya stiffened and stood straight as a pole as Tsunade was glaring at them both. Her tone of voice screamed of bloody murder as she pointed to the office. My office. Now. Boy, imagine what Tsunade would do when Naruto was going to drop another bomb in the office. Maybe he could give the woman a slip and let Jiraiya handle all the fallout. This was payback for almost marrying him off. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.